And welcome back to another special edition of the Michael Decon Program. We've got another phenomenal show for all of you here this evening. Timing is and will be everything. In a moment, Captain Dan Hanley makes his return, and of course making his debut is Mr. Doug Greene. Mr. Hanley was terminated by United Airlines in 2003 for speaking out on issues surrounding 9/11. Captain Greene is an American veteran held hostage by a broken U.S. justice system who was forced overseas after being denied his day in court. Stick around after the interview. We have some rather disturbing audio to share with all of you out there. You don't want to miss it. If it's true, we have a bombshell on our hands, folks. Now let's get down to business and bring in our guests. And I believe everyone is ready. Mike, are you with us?
Hello.
There he is. And Dan, are you out there?
I'm here, Michael. Thank you for having me on the program again.
No problem. And of course, we do have Mr. Doug Greene. What's going on, Doug?
Hi, Michael. Doug Greene. It's nice to be here with you.
Very nice, very nice. Gentlemen, I'm so glad all of you are here. And Doug and Dan, I must say, this is a confession. You both are not here by accident. I picked this date specifically because of Osama bin Laden. It's the reunion. So this was no coincidence. I mean, I brought you here for a reason, no doubt. And the date says it all, Captain.
Yeah.
Oh, yes.
I didn't realize that.
Oh, yes. Timing is everything. So, gentlemen, thank you so much for being here. I've been looking forward to this. As always, we've got a full house, ladies and gentlemen, plenty of ground to cover. And, of course, I wanted to start with a brief introduction with both of you gentlemen. And let's begin with Captain Dan Hanley. Dan, let's start with you. Tell us a little bit about yourself and how you sort of got into this web of drama, my friend.
Okay, well, I've been on the program before, so some of you may have heard all this before.
Right.
But for those of you who haven't, I was a pilot my entire working life. I commenced flying over 50 years ago in 1968 at age 19, first as a civilian, where I acquired my private commercial instrument and multi-engine rating by 1970. Finished college, and in 1973, with the Vietnam War still raging, I had to make service plans, so I chose naval aviation. And over the next 10 years, I flew the four-engine turboprop, a P-3 Orion, that was used by the U.S. Navy to track Soviet submarines during the Cold War. In 1978, I was hired by United Airlines as a pilot, and over the course of the next 25 years, I flew 7 different aircraft. So all total, over a 35-year career span, I flew 15 different aircraft, accruing over 20,000 flight hours. As you mentioned, and we can talk about it later, Michael, I was illegally grounded as a pilot, as Michael had mentioned, and
Right.
we can talk about specifics a little bit later. Michael, would you want me to go on and talk about what I currently serve as right now, or would you want to bring Doug on?
Oh, continue for a moment here. It's okay. We have lots of time.
Okay, okay. Well, I presently live in Islamabad, Pakistan. Some people think because I'm somewhat controversial that I'm hiding out over here, and nothing could be further from the truth. I met, fell in love with, and married a Pakistani in 2010, and have lived here ever since. But I currently serve as the director and international public spokesperson for a global grassroots effort called 9/11 Pilot Whistleblowers, and we got a website at 911pilot.org and a YouTube channel at 911 Pilots if you want to check that out. But the purpose of our organization is to show that there were no Muslim hijackers at the controls of the 9/11 aircraft.
I want to
So
stop
that
you
the
right
aircraft,
there really quickly, Dan, and say that
yeah,
is something most people out there, when they hear it the first time initially, they think, what on earth is this man talking about? He must be insane.
yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Sure.
but bear with me because I can run us through our website and some of the information there, and I can assure you that we have facts and information to back our assertions here. But that's our purpose, is to show there were no Muslim hijackers at the control of the 9/11 aircraft, but that the aircraft were electronically hijacked through employment of a system called the uninterruptible autopilot that enables a remote source to take complete control of the aircraft autopilot and flight management computer and guide it to its target destination. Now, once this system is engaged, the pilots can no longer disconnect it. They're along for the ride. The goal of our organization is to recruit, and this is an ongoing process. We're recruiting active and retired civilian and military pilots from around the world who will testify on camera or attest to the fact that not only could these alleged Muslim hijackers not have flown the aircraft and the flight profiles, but that they could not have flown them themselves. And we're having some difficulty recruiting pilots because we can talk about what happens to whistleblowing pilots in the industry as we get into the program. But there's over 300,000 pilots in the world. It sounds like a big number, but it isn't when you compare it to the global population. But they're either afraid to speak out for fear of losing their job,
Right.
or they say it's been over 20 years ago. It's old. It's an old story. I'm not interested, and they walk away from me. So walk away from it. So where are we going with this? Well, two-pronged attack. There's a group called the Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry, and they got together with the largest whistleblowers in the world and compiled 57 evidence packages and presented it to a U.S. attorney in New York, forcing him to convene a grand jury investigation into their allegations that World Trade Center buildings 1, 2, and 7, and yes, there was a third building that came down that day, were brought down by controlled demolition and not by jet aircraft impact damages or the fuel fires that ensued. So where is that right now? The Department of Justice is trying to stonewall them big time because it's an open closed case. It's a slam dunk. If they ever got their information before a grand jury, it would prove conclusively that the buildings were brought down by controlled demolition and blow the holy hell out of the official story. So we're talking with the lawyers committee. They're not presently representing us legally. They told us that we're in the dugout right now, waiting our turn at bat. But that's our intent, is to compile this testimony from pilots and other evidence and submit it to a U.S. attorney so that we can force a grand jury investigation into our allegation. And then this is part of the reason I wanted to come on, Michael, briefly, to talk about the FAA and what's happening. In August, on behalf of the organization, I filed a whistleblower report via the FAA hotline. It was an electronic submission, and I included a lot of information to back our assertions and regarding the uninterruptible autopilot. And I got an email received acknowledging they had received my report, and I thought, good, I got my foot in the door. And about a week later, I get an email from an FAA aeronautical engineer in Seattle who said that he was going to be my point of contact, and he wanted to set up a conference call with him and another gent and myself the next day. Well, long story short, the next day he cancels on me and saying that they didn't realize the depth and breadth of the information that we had provided them with. So I responded with that email with additional information and called the guy and talked to him for about 10 minutes. Nice guy, but he was very tight-lipped, didn't want to say too much. Well, that was the last conversation I had. He didn't respond to any emails. So I wrote his boss in Washington, D.C., who didn't respond to me, but turned it back over to the FAA hotline. The FAA hotline turns around and sends me an email saying, quoting 2 FAA whistleblower reports by number, saying that this has already been addressed, and that the system, they wouldn't even refer to the uninterruptible autopilot. The system you're addressing is no longer in the airplane. Well, I did a Freedom of Information Act request on the 2 whistleblower reports. One of them didn't exist, and the other one was totally irrelevant. So, well, we're getting stonewalled by the FAA. Not surprising, because we believe we're right over target with our story regarding the uninterruptible autopilot. So, a couple of weeks ago, I sent certified letters to the Director of National Intelligence, the Secretary of Transportation, the Attorney General, and the FBI Director, certified mail, requesting that they join us in this investigation. And I pointed out that we were currently being stonewalled by the FAA. So we've got a petition out there. It's not on our website yet, but we're trying to get people to join us on our website and sign the petition. But that's where we are with the Lawyers Committee and the FAA. But real quick, I'm almost done here. If you go to our website at 911pilots.org, you'll see that we cover the differences in size between a Cessna 172 that the hijackers trained in and a 767, photo comparison of the cockpit differences of the 2 aircraft. We do a profile on the hijackers, and then if you go to a remote control page, it goes into detail about the history of remote control aircraft. And if I could, I'll just real quick go over what's on that page. Most people say, you're crazy, you can't remotely control a large commercial jet aircraft, but they will be surprised to discover that over 75 years ago, in 1944, at the close of World War II, the U.S. military launched Operation Aphrodite in Europe, where they gutted out old B-17s to lighten the weight of the aircraft and loaded them with 30,000 pounds of a highly incendiary compound called Torpex. And pilots were required to make the takeoff, but once they got airborne, they bailed out of the airplane, and these airplanes were remotely guided to targets in Europe. Now, that was over 75 years ago, and we only cite 2 examples on the website, but there's many more. But if you jump ahead 40 years to 1984, NASA and the FAA conducted a joint crash test experiment using a large 4-engine commercial jet, a Boeing 720, loaded with crash dummies and cameras, because they wanted to test crew and passenger survivability in the event of a crash landing. What they did was took off this 4-engine jet by remote control flew it around the pattern 6 times in auto landing, and before they intentionally crash landed it. We got a film of it on there. Now, if you jump ahead to the mid-90s, this system that I mentioned at the beginning, this uninterruptible autopilot system, we have proof that this system was developed in the mid-90s prior to 9/11. And it does exactly what we were talking about. It takes control of the autopilot and flight management computer and can remotely control the aircraft to guide it a course, altitude, and speed into any target they have programmed into the system. So there's a 45-minute audio recording of an interview of a avionics technician named Wayne Anderson, that he actually worked on the system in 1996 and 97, and he goes into detail exactly what it does. So if you look, Doug, the other guest on the program, was one of the pilots we interviewed, and I wish I could play some of the pilot interviews right now, just so you could hear their testimony as to why it was impossible for these inexperienced pilots that flown the aircraft, and we can talk about that a little bit later. So I'm almost wrapping it up here. I'll just point out I'm retired. I just turned 72 years old, and people say, why are you still doing this? It's 20 years ago. Let it go. But I'm sorry, there's never been an investigation into 9/11. It's the largest crime ever committed on American soil in its history. And people think the 9/11 Commission constituted a criminal investigation. It did not. And not one pilot was permitted to testify before the 9/11 Commission as to the absurdity of this ludicrous notion that these pilots flew those aircraft, those hijackers flew those aircraft. So the other reason I'm personally doing this is that the subhuman mobsters, I call them, that planned and executed 9/11 are still at large. It wasn't Osama bin Laden and 19 angry hijackers. We all know that. We're not just doing this for the 2,977 innocents that were murdered in the U.S. on 9/11, but also for the millions of Muslims and others who have died, been maimed, or displaced as a result of the illegal and unwarranted wars based on the lines of 9/11. So I'm in it for the duration of my life. I feel like it's such a heinous crime, and so many people have suffered that I have to speak out. So thank you for giving me time to say all that, Michael.
Understood. And before we throw it back over, before we throw it to Doug, Mr. Doug Greene here, I did want to ask you one question, Dan, and I'm pretty sure I know the answer, but of course you were terminated by United Airlines in 2003. And I must ask you, now in 2021, do you at all have any regret going down the route you have gone?
Only the way I did it. I still would have spoken out and said the things that I did, but I might have handled it a little bit different.
I see.
I mean, go ahead.
I was just saying you would have handled it slightly different than you did initially.
Right.
I see.
I was naive back then. You got to realize it was 2002, 2003, and we all didn't realize the police state that was evolving at the time. And I still foolishly believe that we had a government. I believe that I had laws and regulations to protect me, but more importantly, institutions of government that would investigate my claims, and I had neither. So, in retrospect, if I knew back then what I know now, I definitely would have handled it differently.
Understood.
And one more thing I want to mention, Michael, if people want to know details rather than go into a lengthy expose of what happened to me in 2003, if you go to our website at 911pilots.org, there's an About Dan Hanley page. If you go to that and scroll to the bottom, there's a lengthy affidavit that goes into detail about the hideous way they got rid of me.
Oh, yes. It's a very similar tale for lots of folks out there who step out there and let their voice be heard on certain subjects. I think Doug was talking there. I'm sorry if I cut you off.
No, I
or was
said
that Mike?
no pun intended when he said something hideous happened.
Oh, yes.
No
Right.
Sorry, I know it was a
Sorry
serious moment. I didn't want to break the ice too badly.
Very nice. Very nice. And of course, we do have Mike Hideous here, the co-host of the program. We love Mike A lot here, of course. We appreciate
Somebody
him.
does.
Yes, we appreciate you here, Mike. Go ahead and say hello to everyone.
Hello, everyone.
You guys can say hi. It's okay. Don't worry. He's not going to bite you. It's okay. Very nice,
Yeah,
but yes.
it's good. It's all. Everybody knows who I am on this show by this point, so it's all good.
Very nice. And of course, the birds are singing in the background. Love that. And Doug, are you with us now?
I am.
There he is. And Doug, as a preamble, I want you to sort of walk us through your background a little bit, of course, and tell us your recollection of the morning of 9/11, of course. Well, we have this conversation. Always fun to sort of highlight that, as everyone's morning was pretty chaotic. Go ahead, Doug.
Yes, it was. That's for sure. Let me just give you a little background in my history.
Yes, sir.
I'm originally from Michigan. I grew up there as a child, and then I went into the Air Force in 1980. And I initially went in as an air traffic controller. And after I was in the Air Force for 4 years, I got out of the Air Force. I was going to college while I was in the Air Force, and then I went to school full time, after which I was offered a job with the FAA as an air traffic controller. I went to the Mike Monroe Aeronautical Center in Oklahoma City, completed the program, and then after which I went out to California, where you are, Michael, up there in the Antelope Valley in Palmdale, California.
Oh,
It's
nice.
located near Air Force Plant 42, where Los Angeles Center is located.
Word.
And I spent some time there. I found out about opportunities in the Air National Guard. I was already flying as a private pilot out at the Edwards Air Force Base Aero Club. And when I found out about opportunities to go back into the Air Force and to go to officers training and pilot training, I immediately took advantage of that. I went to Vance Air Force Base, and I checked out as a distinguished graduate from both officers training and pilot training. And then I went on to my primary aircraft in the A-37 light attack airplane. I flew the A-37 for about 4 years, after which I transitioned to the C-130 Hercules, and I was stationed at units all over the country, and I spent time overseas in Central and South America, Panama Air Force Base, in Germany, flying NATO exercises all across Europe and other parts of the world. And so I had an extensive year. I had an extensive time of service. I was actually in the Middle East. I was stationed at Prince Sultan Air Base in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. I was stationed at so many different places.
Wow.
It would take a long time to highlight all those. But nonetheless, I was also working contemporaneously in the civilian community as a pilot. Once I had enough flying time, I initially got a job flying a Learjet, a Lear 23, flew Falcon 20s after that. And then I was hired at United Parcel Service. And that's why I'm in this fight, to restore some sense of justice and reality to a world that we were all naive, we all are naive sometimes in believing in, and our sacred institutions and regulatory agencies to only find out that they don't exist. And after 22 years of service in the Air Force, serving to defend to protect the security and freedoms of the American people, I was greatly disappointed to see that these institutions are just a notion and they don't exist. But nonetheless, at UPS, I flew the DC-8 as a flight engineer, a first officer. I also flew the Boeing 747, 100, 200. I transitioned to captain on the Boeing 757, 767. I flew the Boeing the MD-11, and who was acquired by Boeing at some point when the two companies merged. And then eventually I transitioned to the Boeing 747, 400. And then in 2013, I had been targeted by UPS because I was against the corruption of the union, supporting the company against labor, and they're embezzling millions of dollars of membership dues to support the company's labor containment program against the pilots. And so therefore, because I used a four-letter word called ALPA, Airline Pilots Association, I got a target on my back since 2011 at UPS, and UPS managers affirmed that to be true. And so I was constantly living in fear for my job. And in 2013, after they built a fraudulent case against me, manufacturing false facts and coercing pilots that were involved in the substance abuse program that had undisclosed DUIs to the FAA, and other pilots that had stole tens of thousands of dollars in fraudulent moving expenses to lie about me, I have irrefutable proof, evidence beyond reasonable doubt that all of this is true. I have depositions, I have audio files, I have 6,000 pages of discovery that was withheld from us until 24 hours before an arbitration hearing on purpose. And so they basically set me up very similar to the way they tried to set Dan up, except I wouldn't entertain it. So they fired me for insubordination after 20 years of service. And unfortunately, this corporate culture at UPS has existed for quite some time. And many people just aren't aware of it because most of their tragedies and their crashes with aircraft and their massacres at gateways from Birmingham, Alabama to San Francisco, California to a potential massacre in Sunnyvale, California, it's because of a corporate culture that targets employees, and they spend more time in court than they do delivering packages. And unfortunately, they are the law. I've come to realize they are the law. They own the law. They're Mitch McConnell's fourth largest dark money donor, and Mitch McConnell is the grand master. So after 2013, I was on the street, and the justice system was broke. The regulatory agencies didn't work. Whistleblower complaints were failed. DOL investigators that had investigated other similar airline pilots cases, to include myself, Mike Protak, Carl Suring, Carlene Pettit, by an investigator named Paul McDevitt at the DOL Seattle office. He didn't investigate a single thing. He violated the Inspector General's 8 elements of essential investigations. He never interviewed witnesses. We did a Freedom of Information Act request, and we showed that this guy had undisclosed things to the FAA, and then the FAA just rubber stamped a fraudulent investigation. This guy never investigated a single adverse witness that all lied about me, and I have irrefutable proof that they did. And these pilots know they lied about me, and I'm sure they're terrified to hear me on this radio show.
Really?
So nonetheless, in 2013, I didn't give up my tenacity to continue with my profession. They went out of their way to blackball me, no matter where I went, but luckily I was able to sell myself and my skills and my talents and my professionalism, and I worked for another airline from the United States based in Liège, Belgium. And then I eventually moved over to Germany, and now I'm working far, far away from the United States, flying Boeing 777s. For the past 6 years, I've accumulated over 3,000 hours. I have a perfect, flawless record in aviation. Like Dan, I never failed a medical exam. I never failed a single check ride. I have a perfect record. They know it, and they're trying to cover up the cover-up. They spent millions of dollars to keep this out of court. And so that's why I'm in this fight. I want to restore some sense of decency to our sacred institutions, our justice system, and our regulatory agencies that no longer exist. And so to answer your question about 9/11,
yeah,
that was a very memorable experience for me. I'll never forget that day. I was on a UPS flight. I'd taken off out of Louisville, Kentucky on a Boeing 747-200 as a first officer. And we were en route to Anchorage, Alaska, where I used to be based and lived when I was a captain on the 747-400. And we were flying across the Yukon in Canada, and I was tuning in some NDB, non-directional beacon radio stations, and I inadvertently picked up a radio station, and I thought I was listening to an Orson Welles show. That's funny. I looked over at the cabin and I say, "Hey, you got to listen to this. I'm not sure what's going on here, if this is real or what." And then so shortly there, and it was a scratchy news station. If you know anything about aviation and some of these older navigation aids like non-directional beacons, the frequencies are kind of scratchy and you can't hear them real clear unless you're very close.
So initially you thought it was like a joke.
I didn't know what it was, and I thought, is this like a storyteller? You know, I didn't have a clear connection, but nonetheless, shortly thereafter, we were contacted by the air traffic controllers in Canada as we were flying through Canadian airspace, and because we were so close to Anchorage, we were advised that all aircraft were to land at the nearest suitable airport, and for us, it was Anchorage. So we continued to our destination and landed in Anchorage.
Wow.
And just so you and the listeners know, most of the skies were shut down and all airplanes were ordered to land, but United Parcel Service was still granted an exception to that. after we landed in Anchorage, and then a couple days later, we were authorized to take off and to fly to Narita, Japan, and I ended up spending most of the time there grounded after we continued a flight overseas there with a bunch of Northwest pilots. We were waiting for an opportunity to return back to the States. So that was my experience with 9/11, when where I was and how it went down.
And were you freaked out at all hearing this initially?
When I heard about it, being a former military pilot, it was quite alarming, and then when I finally got to Anchorage, because I lived there in Alaska, and I went home to see my wife, and she was getting ready for work, and we saw the TV footage, and I just couldn't believe my eyes. I was just like, no, this can't be real, So
it was very surreal, like something
yes,
out of a movie, for sure.
Very much so. And, and for years, like so many other Americans, I believed the narrative that we were told to swallow with all the other propaganda and rhetoric that exists in our country. And so subsequently, I kind of followed that storyline. And at the time, I was in the Alaska Air National Guard, flying C-130s. And, you kind of had that sense of patriotism. The homeland's been hit. It's another Pearl Harbor type scenario. And then over time, and because of the experiences that I went to, because this fight was brought to me by epic corruption, I started to learn more about 9/11, and I started to question things. And I actually, one of my first officers at UPS at the time, he's a captain now, his parents were purportedly on one of the flights that crashed into the Pentagon.
Damn.
As a matter of fact, it was American Airlines Flight 77. Bud Flagg and his wife were supposedly on that flight. And, I always got some vibes from Mark that maybe things didn't happen the way the U.S. government has propagated to the rest of the country. I've always thought that maybe he knew something that he couldn't quite disclose. But because I flew with him several times after the event, and of course he was heartbroken losing his parents, his mother and father, as they were supposedly on that flight. The actual demise of their death to this day is unknown, because, as you know, at that crash site, the airplane was pretty much obliterated, except for a pristine green passport purportedly from Saudi Arabia. It looked like it was hot off the press. It looked like kind of a drop-down weapon that police officers often use, but instead it was a passport. So, you have to start questioning these things. And so I did. And over the years, I aligned myself with Dan and other pilots that have been targeted and other whistleblowers for simply trying to do our job, trying to be professionals, trying to enforce the safety and security of the airline industry and the flying public. And this breach by in my opinion, our government, an act of domestic terrorism against their own people to fit their agenda and their objectives of dark money and a deeper state of our government that truly exists, is appalling. As a matter of fact, when I talked to one of my colleagues who used to be a mission commander of the Air Force Thunderbirds, he kind of said to me after 9/11, and he was my first officer at UPS on the 757, 767, MD-11, and the 747-400, and he was a witness at the trumped-up arbitration hearing, a character witness on my behalf, and he said to the arbitration hearing that, what are we doing here? Doug Greene's one of the finest captains I've ever flown with. He's a master when it comes to crew resource management, not just bringing in the crew, but bringing in the ground people to get the mission accomplished. And he's a mentor to other pilots. And I'd like to know what we're doing here. Well, he told me, before that boondoggle and that whole escapade trying to target me and build the case against me because safeties cost too much money. They don't like people that want to enforce safety and security. And our government, unfortunately, supports that. The FAA supports it. The Department of Labor supports it. And we have no protections. But he told me, he says, you know what, Doug? He says, after 9/11, he says, I finally realized what that oath was all about when we became officers. We took an oath that we swore to defend the Constitution against all enemies, both foreign and domestic,
right,
to preserve the security and freedom of the American people. So help me God. Well, did you ever see that scene from Top Gun? Bullshit. Yeah, well, that's that. I hate to say it that way, but pretty much that's what that oath has turned into. It's worthless. It's meaningless. and it's said disingenuously with people's fingers crossed behind their back. But he said to me, he said, they always told us, they want us to make us believe who our foreign enemies were. And I've come to realize over the years that that's not true, as he said. And I said, well, I have too, without a doubt. But he said they never really told us who the domestic enemies were.
Right.
He says, but now I know. It's our own government.
There's always two sides of every story, and we are rarely ever told the truth. I mean, we still don't have all the facts with 9/11 or JFK, just to mention the two major ones. We still don't have all the files out there for the public to see. The ones that protect the Saudi Arabians.
Right.
Well said.
We'll continue in a moment here, but just to cut you off there, Doug, and everyone else listening to this, those that are just listening to this via audio, those on YouTube are now seeing a giant photo of Bush being told about the World Trade Center, and he has that face of shock and disbelief in his eyes. I'm sure everyone remembers that when he was reading to that classroom. You remember that, boys?
Yes.
Oh, yes.
I do.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Mike, let's start with you. You recall what went on that morning, correct? Obviously.
Oh, I sure do, yeah. I wanted to ask a question to the captains.
Jump in there. Go in there, Mike.
I remember hearing somewhere when Trump was in office, I remember hearing somewhere that there was some possibility that he was going to reopen the investigation for 9/11. Do you think that was true? And if it was, do you think it had anything to do with the possibility that that may be one of the reasons that the other politicians hated him so much? Is there any association with his being in commander in chief and considering opening up the files again on 9/11, and then if they were corrupt, that it would have really set off a major chain link of catastrophe with everybody just going.
I don't remember exactly the wording of the statement he made, but he said something like, we're going to get to the bottom of who is responsible for 9/11, which intimates that he's going to open an investigation. But whether or not that's why politicians ran away from him, I don't know, because any politician in office that would stand up and say that the 9/11 story is a lie just committed career suicide, if
Right.
not literally suicided themselves, because they'll wind up like Kennedy.
Right. My point exactly.
Yeah.
Well said, Dan. I agree. And just to make it clear up in front, for me, I'm not a partisan person.
Yes, sir.
There's one party in the United States of America that goes by two different names, in my opinion, and they have disingenuous acts of conflict to try to make people believe that there's a conflict between these two parties. But in fact, when the lights turn off and the cameras are shut off, both sides are paid by the same dark money donors, and we know who they are.
Captain Greene, I got to interrupt you on that.
Sure.
Are you saying, all right, so I understand what you said, that Democratic and Republican parties are one and the same. I've heard that before, but you got to ask yourself, based on what we went through for the last 4 years, do you really think that Trump, was part of that? I mean, you got to admit, this is a guy who came in and shook the board, who took all the players and threw them up in the air, the chessboard, if you will. And it is my personal opinion, I sincerely believe that it is a result of his rebellion, so to speak, for lack of a better term, that they were scared shit. And I cannot think any other way that he was a part of a two-party, one system, if you will. I mean, you're not saying that about Trump, are you? Because there's no way he was associated.
Let me answer your question on that.
Please.
The bottom line for a lot of people in this world that we live in, they have a go along to get along mentality. Now, in some instances, they'll oppose the system if it benefits them. I think Donald Trump indeed did rattle a lot of cages, and he did say and do some things that made the deeper state of our government stand up and get their attention. and he did know how to do that. But unfortunately, the Grand Master, the magic man behind the curtain, was Mitch McConnell. It always has been. And right now he's been slightly neutered, but he still has a lot of power.
The puppet master, yes.
Yeah, he's the Grand Master, but Trump was his puppet.
Oh my!
And he basically followed the playbook of whatever Mitch McConnell gave him. And unfortunately, Mitch McConnell had tainted all of our sacred institutions, to include our justice system, with judges picked by Leonard Leal from the Federalist Society, to make sure that people like me, Dan, and others never walk into a courtroom, that can never do their job and enforce the safety and security of the airline industry. It's a revolving door of corruption.
By the way, Claudio Marty in the chat says Trump was pandering in terms of going into 9/11. He was trying to pander to that audience. I think that's what Claudio Marty in the chat room is saying. And by the way, my good point in bringing in Trump, I'm looking at Bush right now and I'm thinking, I'm seeing some similarities right now. I'm living back that era, and then I'm going back in time here in 2021, present time, and I'm thinking, Bush at one time was loved. He was seen almost like a god for a while from the Republicans back in that era. And now, fast forward through time, he's not seen that way no more. He's kind of seen like a greasy dirt, you know what I'm saying. But I'm just saying that's what time does to everyone. Everyone's narrative changes after time, and well, now Bush is seen as sort of, like I said, a piece of crap now.
Yeah.
That's what happens, At one time you're on top, then the next year you're not. People forget about you. You start, talking at weddings. But that's another story.
For the record, I didn't like him.
You didn't like Bush.
I did not like Bush. I thought he was an idiot, and I sincerely believe that there was no reason for us to go into Iraq or Afghanistan.
Well,
there wasn't.
Yeah, there wasn't.
It was all based on a lie.
Right.
Agree with you 100%, Michael.
Yeah, well, first of all, they gave. All right, now try to understand where I'm going with this, because I know you guys are saying that the Arabs had nothing to do with it. But that aside, he gets on the television and says, okay, well, we're going to go in and we're going to bomb the caves on the hills of Afghanistan.
Remember how gun-ho everyone was? By the way, Mike, everyone was so gun-ho. Everyone was so united. I'm sorry, I jumped in there, but I just can't forget that, how everyone, was so united for war. We wanted to go and kill everyone. It was quite exciting. It was exciting. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I've never seen anything like that.
I was extremely patriotic on that time era. But my point is this.
Go ahead.
So he gives everybody, he goes on television and says, okay, we're going to go and bomb Afghanistan because that's where bin Laden is. And that was like, how many weeks or months was that in advance? Giving this man, who all he had to do was turn on the American television and watch what was happening, and he could have split. And that is exactly what happened.
Yeah.
But again, you guys are saying that the Arabs were not involved.
Yes, we're going to cover that in a moment here.
Let's qualify that remark.
Yep. Go ahead, Dan, if you want to start.
There were no Arabs involved. The Saudi involvement, certain people in Saudi Arabia that may have been involved. If there were hijackers, and I believe there were, they did come over and train in U.S. schools. I contend that they were patsy. So to say that there were no Muslims involved, I'm just saying, our organization is just saying they didn't fly the airplane. They couldn't have flown the airplane. And that alone blows the holy hell out of the official story. When you say there were no Muslims at the controls and they were remotely controlled, and we can prove the system existed. When you look at the flight profiles of the 3 airplanes that hit buildings, and you weigh that against the resume of each of these hijackers, you realize, and Doug, chime in here, you'll realize that it was impossible for these inexperienced pilots to have flown those aircraft. I flew Cessnas, as did Doug, in our younger days, so I know how inexperienced I was back then. And I also flew the 757, 767, and know how complex those aircraft are. And for those guys that have never flown those airplanes before, never mind at 500 knots and at that altitude, is impossible. And so the conclusion you arrive at saying, well, 3 airplanes hit buildings. How did that happen? Well, the only viable alternative explanation would be the employment of this uninterruptible autopilot system. And we know that bin Laden did not have access to this technology. So.
Yes, and by the way, again, no coincidence why we're all here. This is the 10th anniversary of his death, quote unquote, the death of Osama bin Laden that was carried out by SEAL Team, what was it, 6 or 7? I'm not quite sure. But keep in mind, you just heard Doug tell all of you out there, Mr. Doug Greene, a pilot. He just said he couldn't fly out. No one could. However, that day, it just so happened that Osama bin Laden's kids were escorted out of this country.
I believe 174 people, was it not?
Osama bin Laden, a.k.a. Tim Osman, he was our connection in the Middle East. He's our CIA-trained asset, after all. So, of course, we had to get his family out of there, right? Right. Yeah, correct.
And correct me if I'm wrong, aren't all the SEALs who were in that project, aren't they all dead?
Not all of them, but a lot of them did.
I think a lot of them are dead, yes.
In a helicopter crash. Right.
I'm really skeptical about his death, though, gentlemen. That's kind of why we're here as well. I'm not quite sure if he actually died when they say he did. I believe firmly that he died before that.
Well, some people say he was in the U.S. hospital in the United Arab Emirates, or he was in a hospital in the UAE before 9/11 and was visited by CIA agents there, but I can't confirm that. I mean, Benazir Bhutto made a statement on BBC that he had died prior to 9/11. So there's a lot of people, because he was on dialysis suffering from kidney failure, there's a lot of people believe that he died. But the official story is endorsed by the Pakistan government, which surprises me. They say, yeah, it was him, and yeah, they violated the sovereignty of our country and came in and killed him. But I don't know what to believe, because I've heard both sides of the story. I tend to believe it wasn't him, but I can't unequivocally state that's how I feel.
That's okay. That's fair enough.
It seems that, unfortunately, gentlemen, and to the audience, that truth in the United States is a grand illusion. Nobody really knows what truth is anymore. It's like living in a fog when it comes to truth. These core values of integrity and honesty and character seem to have been lost, just like on the currency of "In God We Trust." It's a terrible shame. But as Dan said, I highly agree with him that the facts and the data exceeds the probability of the narrative that these inexperienced pilots could ever jump into a wide-body jet, 7.5 or 7.6, 777. They weren't flying 777s that day, 7.5s and 7.6s. But there's no way that these guys could jump in there and program those flight management computers and to, operate the lateral navigation, the vertical navigation components, LNAV and VNAV, which you have to couple up to the flight management computer and the autopilot to nail a target like that. And when you consider the very fact that these guys were exceeding the max structural airspeed of the airplane by 110 knots, the Corning velocity and the radius of turn would have been so great, and they certainly would have over-G'd the airplane and caused structural damage. So, and especially with these guys inexperienced. I mean, even experienced guys like us with almost 20,000 hours of flight time in wide-body jets, we couldn't pull that off.
They were the Michael Jordans of flight school. That's what it was, They were number one. They were on top of the game.
Special program on my computer. Hey, I was sitting on the toilet with the plunger between my legs, and there I was, and that's how they practice, right?
Right. Yeah. And here's a weird fact, by the way. Some of the alleged hijackers actually stayed in a small apartment, the same one where my friend currently lives today. Very, very strange. And another weird thing is, Dan, as you recall, I interviewed a friend of yours recently.
Yes.
Mr. Decon Program. Right. And of course, as I was researching some of the work that he's done, I remember seeing a quote by the long-time serving former Malaysian Premier Mr. Mohammed, saying that Arab Muslims are incapable of carrying out the 9/11 attacks.
Yeah. Well, if I could just real quick interject here.
Go ahead.
The Pentagon profile.
Yes.
Okay. Hani Hanjour was a 29-year-old pilot from the UAE. I'm sorry, from Saudi Arabia. Okay. And he had come to the States in the mid-90s and did some training and then went back and came back just about a year prior to 9/11 and went back out to Jet Tech Flight School in Arizona. And they wouldn't even take him back because they said he was such a poor student that he couldn't handle the program. And a month prior to 9/11, he goes over to the Freeway Airport in Maryland and tries to rent a Cessna 172, and they wouldn't rent it to him because they said he couldn't handle the airplane. Now, if you look at this Pentagon flight profile, American 77 took off from Dulles heading west, got out west of the field and made a U-turn, coming back in a descent, and at 7,000 feet starts this corkscrew 330-degree descending, accelerating turn to arrive precisely at the surface at over 500 miles an hour to strike without hitting the surface, to strike the Office of Naval Intelligence. Now, this maneuver was replicated in a flight simulator by pilots for 9/11 Truth, very experienced pilots there, and without exception, they crashed the simulator every time they tried the maneuver. So the whole story is garbage. There's no way he could have flown that profile, and we could get into the other two, but he's the smoking gun amongst the hijackers.
Hani Hanjour, I believe, is who you're referring to, correct?
Right.
I believe his flight attendance was also, or his class attendance was very bad, by the way, for flight school.
Right. He cut classes.
That's
and
right.
Wasn't prepared for flight. As a matter of fact, if you go to the hijackers page on our website at 911pilot.org, it goes into a lot of notes at the bottom of Hanjour's profile on that page. Shows you what a poor student the guy was.
It's pretty wild. I mean, you've had so many years of experience, Dan, yourself, about 23 years of flight time or of experience, Dan, and he's able to do this so easily. I mean, my God, Dan, well, why did you pay for school?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Right, yes.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know, that narrative that you just gave, Dan, kind of made me, relate it to the recreation of Sully Sullenberger's flight on the Hudson as well. They tried to hang him at the NTSB because that's what they do. They always want to hang the pilot first, so the aircraft manufacturers and any of the people that potentially could have caused the crash, they can be relieved of any liability. Of course, that's what normally it's about. It's all about the money and the attorneys. But nonetheless, look what happened in that case. When he says, wait a minute, how about human factors? How about pilot reaction time? You guys knew this was going to happen. You knew when it was going to happen. You were cocked and locked, ready to go, and you didn't consider any of this. So fine, they say, okay, well, we'll give you, 30 seconds for, human reaction time? And when they did, every single one of them crashed the simulator in every scenario, every single one of them. And think about the level of experience that Sully Sullenberger had compared to a couple amateurs that just had a private pilot's license tooling around in a Cessna 172. Give me a break. I was born at night, but not last night. And it's kind of interesting the point that you make. Dan, you made a really great point earlier, and we should relate this to this conversation. Most American people, live in an illusion, and they're somewhat naive about things they don't know. And so you can sell them just about anything if you package it right. Well, that's what this narrative was. It was all about packaging this and insulting the intelligence of the American people and the world, the great American lie, one of many. And subsequently, they sell this great American lie, but did they ever have pilots really interject? Did anybody actually talk to people like us and say, hey, this isn't even possible? No, pilots never get to testify. Pilots never get to walk into a courtroom. Pilots are never involved in the 9/11 Commission. They don't want pilots involved. Hey, wait a minute. Federal Flight Deck Officer Program, pilots want to actually have guns on the airplane? Oh my God, we can't have that. Why did the U.S. government? Why did the U.S. government challenge and try to take opposition to putting in a program that would provide defense to the flight deck if, in fact, they really believed this narrative was true? They didn't want us to be armed crew members, despite the fact that the majority of the pilots in the industry at one time or another, or currently are still active in the military, have been trained with small arms. Carrying guns on the airplane was standard operating procedure. We had a gun box in the airplane. We broke the seal and we armed. But they didn't want us to have guns after 9/11. And to this day, they're still trying to nix that program, that federal flight deck officer program, because they don't. Yeah, go ahead.
I'm sorry, Doug. I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but getting back to what you said, the reason why they didn't bring any pilots before the 9/11 Commission or ask us if we thought it was possible was because their attitude was, we already know who did it. They came up with the hijacker's name right away. We found a passport in the rubble at the Twin Towers. We found a bandana out in the field and where United 93 crashed. So we don't want to ask those questions. We already know. And everybody bought into it. And why, I always say, why did the bulk of the global population buy into this story that these inexperienced pilots flew those airplanes? And the only conclusion I can come to is that 99% of the world aren't pilots, and they cannot conceive of the absurdity of this notion that they flew the plane. So,
yeah, well, and it's quite a notion, that's for sure, because as you asked just a moment ago, about Muslims in general. I mean, I've flown with countless pilots from Malaysian Airlines, and because a lot of them lost their jobs as a result of the mishaps with the two airplanes at Malaysian Airlines. And and these people are God-fearing people, just like you and I. Okay, it's a different religion, it's a different faith. They're very devout to their faith. They pray 5 times a day. I've flown with these guys. I know what they're like, and they have questions about the Malaysian crashes, and Dan and I have the same questions. And I think there's evidence out there that strongly suggests that there was foul play in both those mishaps, just like in the 9/11 event. And without a doubt, I've studied it extensively.
They all connect. They all connect somehow, Doug. Yes.
Oh yeah, but what's funny is they always want to target the pilots. They always want to put the blame on the pilots. And it's funny because, like, for instance, at UPS, they tried to build this false case about me, and they've spent millions of dollars to cover this case up because they know if I actually walk into a courtroom, it's over in 60 minutes. It's that simple. That's why I can't get into a courtroom, and I've spent over $500,000 in 7 years of my life, and I filed briefs all the way up to the Supreme Court, and I've never given my right to walk into a courtroom after 22 years of service defending this country. What a joke. But get this, guys, you're not going to believe this. After all the trouble they went to blackball me and to lie about me, I actually flew the President of the United States family across the North Atlantic Ocean in a Boeing 777
Really?
within the last 2 years.
Wow.
I was vetted by Secret Service. I was the captain of the airplane, and I had his family on board. So if all these things are true, how's that possible? You see, but they always blame the pilots. But see, they forgot to maybe take a closer look at what they did to me and how they lied about me and how they lie about other pilots like Carleen Pettit, like Dan Hanley, like ProTech, Gerald Brown. I got hundreds of pilots, I can tell you, that try to report the safety and security of the airline industry. And the consequences of 9/11 has crippled our ability to exercise our pilot and command authority to do our job without fear of retaliation, workplace violence, and to be in fear of being terminated.
Oh yes.
That's why pilots keep their mouths shut, because we're the poster.
Exactly. 300,000 pilots. You think, had pilots spoken out in unison after 9/11, say it's not possible, stop saying it, it couldn't have happened, the whole situation would have changed. But they didn't. And why? Because of exactly what you're saying, Doug. They're afraid because they've seen it sent when something happens, like happened to me or Doug, and we can talk about Carleen Pettit. I'd like to talk about her. Okay. Yes. Or any of these other whistleblowers out there. It sends a chilling signal out there to any other would-be whistleblower, keep your head down in the foxhole or you'll get it blown off.
That's right. And as a reminder, Dan, I always tell everyone that you went through the ringer here in terms of what you believe and how you were sort of you were exiled rather from the business. Essentially,
Right.
you were blackballed, Dan, and of course, as a result, you even lost part of your family, Dan.
Yes, I lost my entire family. I can give you the Reader's Digest version of what happened to me here without going into a lot of detail.
Yeah, go ahead.
But after 9/11, I started observing holes in the aviation safety and security system. And I was flying with crews. I was flying out of New York, and crews were afraid because a lot of flight attendants I flew with lost friends in United 93 in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, and wanted me to say something because they felt unprotected out there, which I did. And the first thing I noticed was I was getting tremendous blowback, not only from my union, but from the company saying, keep your head down. These guys are nasty. If you take it to the next level, you're going to get hurt. Well, I wouldn't. There were other factors, political and financial factors that came into play here, but I wouldn't shut up. And I was going to write a letter to the CEO of United Airlines, and my union boss in New York said, send it to me first, please, before you send it in, and I'll forward it to the lawyers to look at. Well, long story short, they looked at this letter I was going to send in saying that my correspondence, my federal reports I was submitting had been stonewalled. And they told me, don't send the letter in or you'll never fly another United Airlines airplane again in your life. So I had covered myself. Let me back up. I knew, just based on my 25 years at United, I had seen people grounded this way. If they can't get you medically, if they can't get you professionally, they'll go after you psychologically or some other way. So to protect myself, I was living in Atlanta at the time. I went and sought out the best mental health professionals I could find, a psychiatrist and a psychologist, said, here's where I am at United. Here's what I think they're going to try to do to me. I'll come here for consultation, run tests on me, do whatever. You got to prove that I'm mentally sound, which they did. So I thought I had myself covered because I had a long correspondence trail with reports and letters and everything else. And I even was recording phone conversations. So I thought I had myself covered when instead of sending in the letter, I sent in these flight safety awareness reports that brought the FAA into the picture. Because up until that point in time, I was keeping it in company. And once I did that, I was immediately pulled out of schedule without cause and told I had to go up to New York to talk to my chief pilot. But the union said they wouldn't represent me. And the company said, you can't bring any attorneys in. And I said, no, I'm out on a limb here. I haven't done anything wrong. I need my attorneys present. Well, we were at an impasse, and I was still being paid at this point in time. And my chief pilot goes out to Denver. He's at the pilot training center, and he runs into the chief flight surgeon at United, who said, is Hanley one of yours? My chief pilot said, yes. And he said, I'll tell you what he said. He said, put the son of a bitch on sick list. And I hadn't seen an aeromedical professional. I had nothing wrong with me at all. So they put me on sick list. And I was running out of sick list, so I called my chief pilot and said, Bob, I'm about to go non-paid. This is punitive. I haven't done anything wrong but filed some reports. So he said to me, Dan, if you submit to the Employee Assistance Program, it's endorsed by the company, the FAA, and the union. It'll guarantee your pay will come in. All you have to do is comply with what the company wants you to do. So I thought I had myself covered. I go, fine, I'll shorten it up here. They flew me up to Chicago. I went over and saw a flight surgeon who asked me to go see their company appointed mental health professional, which I agreed to do. I went over to what I thought was going to be the office of the psychiatrist. I had two pilots drive me over there, and it turned out it was a mental hospital. And I allowed myself to be interned in this hospital just to see how far they would take this thing.
I'm sure you felt good, by the way, as soon as you pulled up to a hospital.
Oh, yeah. Well, I thought
how nice
initially,
of them.
well, her office must be in this hospital. You know, I didn't really think much of it. And
wow.
I'm not going to go into detail because it's on that affidavit.
Yeah, no worries.
But they wound up grounding me, and I didn't exhibit any of the symptoms of being bipolar, if you know what that is, manic depressive, okay? I was only there a few days. They ran some tests on me. But that was their diagnosis, and they grounded me for life based on the medicine that was prescribed for me, which is what I want to bring in Carleen Pettit for. Carleen Pettit is a Delta Airlines first officer, co-pilot, okay? Carleen Pettit, I believe, went to Embry-Riddle Flight Academy in Florida, which is the biggest training academy, civilian training academy in the world, okay? She's got a PhD in aviation safety. She had written books on aviation. She's flown numerous airplanes, and a few years ago, she was pointing out safety issues at Delta Airlines, and they pulled her off. See if this sounds familiar. They pulled her out of schedule, made her go see Delta Airlines shrinks, who diagnosed her as bipolar and grounded her for life. Well, unlike me, I couldn't get a lawyer to represent me. She got a lawyer to represent her and took this thing to court, and the judge ruled in her favor. And who was brought into this, and this made the Wall Street Journal and a couple other newspapers, the senior vice president of flight operations at Delta Airlines at the time that was overseeing this thing was a guy named, help me out here, Doug, I can't think of his name right. Steve Dixon, right? Guess where Steve Dixon is today? He's the FAA administrator. So,
and Steve, let me piggyback on this just a little bit. I want to add some information that I want both Michael and Mike and the listeners to be aware of so they can see what you're faced with. Because let me tell you something. You think you're safe when you get onto an airplane? You walk through that door and you take a glance to the left and you're in awe of all the gauges and dials, and you think you're safe when you get on that airplane, but you have no idea what's really going behind those doors and behind the scenes in these airlines. The airlines are regulating the regulators. There is no more enforcement. And if you look at the CBS story, Tony Dopical, he interviewed recently, it was within probably about the last year, the story's still out there. He interviewed some air safety inspectors, and they came in and they had their faces blacked out and their voices disguised. And he basically ran the story on how the actual air safety inspectors are being threatened with a termination, with discipline up to and including termination for actually doing their job, enforcing things. You got airlines like UPS that are falsifying FAA records. They're pencil whipping things. They're purposely passing guys in the simulator that should be failed. They're breaking the rules left and right. And you got pilots that have DUIs undisclosed to the FAA. Michael Starnes is one of them. And I'm not going to say the other guy's name because they tried to get him to coerce him to lie about me. But when they found out that he never flew with me, they couldn't use him, but they were going to try. They sent an email to labor saying, hey, has this person ever flown with Greene? And he had never flown with me, but they wanted to find out because he had an undisclosed DUI to the FAA that UPS helped cover up, just like they did with Starnes using the same attorney. But the point is, with Carleen Pettit, in her case, they basically abused the language in the contract. And keep in mind, guys, the collective bargaining agreement of these airlines is federal law under the Railway Labor Act. They're supposed to follow this law, but this is a lawless America that we live in. Laws, rules, federal rules of civil procedure, none of it matters. It's all eyewash. You got judges, throwing cases out, when he knows there's thousands of material facts in dispute, but he says there's none, and then he pencil whips a motion for summary judgment in favor of these large airlines, and they destroy the little guy that's trying to do their job to keep the flying public safe. Well, the language in the contracts, most of these airlines have a provision in there where they try to suggest that they have the autonomy to usurp federal law and to make a pilot using their nuclear option of suggesting that they have a medical problem. First, they said it was harassment with me.
Right.
And we caught them in the lie. They knew we caught them. We proved that they were lying. And then they says, well, we think that you might have a medical problem. And they says, and therefore, we have objective evidence that we want you to go to a company designated AME. Did you hear what I said, fellas? A company designated AME. I told them, go screw yourself. I said, I'm holding a first-class medical that's less than 30 days old. There's nothing wrong with me. I never passed the physical. And if you think I'm going to a company designated AME because you're basing your objective evidence is false statements coerced by the union out of pilots that had DUIs, you're out of your mind, especially guys that I never flew with. There's no way I'm ever going to do that. I filed a grievance, and my grievance was never heard by the union. They said, oh, we're going to put it at abeyance because we want to hear the termination grievance. Well, guess what? If they would have heard my grievance, they couldn't have terminated me, and they knew it. And that's why my grievance was never heard. And they tried to do that to other pilots after me, but I helped them tiptoe through the minefield so that they kept their jobs. John Hurd's one of them, and he was involved. He gave a testimony to the NTSB in the crash of UPS Flight 1354 in Birmingham, Alabama, an Airbus A300 that killed everybody. UPS loses a lot of airplanes. There's a lot of mishaps and a lot of problems, but nobody investigates what's really going on behind the corporate culture at UPS and in the entire airline industry. But what you should know with this loose language in these contracts that they have, there's also language that says anything in this contract that federal law does not support, federal law will trump, no pun intended, the contract language that they're trying to use to force pilots to go to a company-designated AME, Aviation Medical Examiner. Yeah. What happened in Carlene's case is they tried to force her. She basically gave an interview to an HR person about her safety concerns, and this HR person, she basically self-diagnosed her, and she's got no degree in the medical field, that she thought she needed to go see a company AME. It was all a setup, just like it was with me. But I didn't let them get that far because I wouldn't be flying today if I had let them do to me what they did to Dan. Okay, they would have ended my career, and I never would have got my money back. But the thing is, what you need to know is the AME guide, the FAA AME guide, is the rule of law, gentlemen. And the AME guide is clear. It says nobody can authorize the reexamination of a certificate holder, somebody that holds a first-class medical, except for the FAA flight surgeon's office, and only if there's a reasonable basis to warrant the reexamination of the airman. But see, so you're going around the law, federal law, because they know if they send this garbage to an FAA flight surgeon's office, and then you actually get to go in and defend yourself against their false allegations, that they're going to lose. So they circumvent federal law, and they use this loose language in the contract, and then the FAA sustains it. And the FAA doesn't do an investigation because, like Dan said, you got these guys at the FAA, that are just like Dixon. Dixon was nominated by Elaine Chao. Elaine Chao is Mitch McConnell's wife. Mitch McConnell's the guy that pushed that confirmation through. That guy has no business being the administrator of the FAA. And his cronies, to include H. Clayton Fouché. Hey, whenever you hear that, fellas, when somebody goes by the first letter of their first name with a period after it, they're dirty. And they don't want anybody to know their real name because they're afraid of consequences for what they're going to do to people and hurt them. Well, H. Clayton Fouché, he should be embarrassed that he has to go by a letter rather than his first name.
Amazing.
We know what his name is.
By the way, Doug, I got to jump in here really quick.
He's just like these attorneys at UPS. E. King Poor. What parent names their kid King?
That's
but his
true.
name's Edward King.
Yeah, I wouldn't never call another adult. I would never call another adult King. By the way, that's
in the country that targets people. He targets labor. This H. Clayton Fouché, he's the FAA director of audit and evaluation, and then his little crony Vince L. Murray, his pencil pusher, he just rubber stamps everything. The DOL, John McDevitt. You should know he was the same Department of Labor investigator that invested my Air 21 whistleblower complaint, that invested Carlene Pettit's whistleblower complaint, and he dismissed both of our cases without complying with one of the 8 essential elements of the Inspector General audit for an essential investigation on a whistleblower complaint. This guy never interviewed a single adverse witness. He threw Carlene's Pettit case. He threw my case. This guy's been hanging pilots for years, and I'm sure he's getting paid very handsomely for it if we follow the money. But the bottom line is, guess what else, fellas? Paul McDevitt, we believe, is directly related to John McDevitt, who's the former VP of all labor and HR relations for UPS. And we want disclosure if in fact there's a relation here, and they refuse to answer our question, just like everything else they refuse. You have no rights, but most Americans don't know this until they're confronted with a situation like Dan and I. And here we are, two former retired military officers that served our country for 22 years on my end and several years in Dan's, and thinking we were protecting the rights and freedoms of the American people. And our system is completely broke. It's a lie.
We got kicked in the teeth. We get kicked in the teeth.
Yeah, but they break all the rules.
Doug, Doug knows a whole bunch of people this has happened to.
Right.
I know several myself, okay? It's not unique to just Doug and I and
Sure.
Carlene Pett and a few others. There's a lot of people out there this has happened to.
Absolutely.
That's why they call it the nuclear option. It's the last resort they have for getting rid of a dissident pilot, and they use it. And with my story, I wasn't trying to get my job back. I was trying to expose a crime that involved a violation of RICO statutes, racketeering, influence, corrupt organizations, okay? I wasn't trying to get my job back. So Doug talks about filing a federal whistleblower report, which I did, and they lost. So I filed another one. They told me it was going to take a year, which was unsatisfactory for me. So I pressed forward with the Department of Justice, Department of Homeland Security, and Department of Transportation, trying to expose this crime this way. And I even had an organization called Whistleblowing Airline Employees Association, and I had my own blog talk radio program that was called that, where I would interview whistleblowers and they would tell their story about what happened to them. So after 5 years of doing this, and I got a blog, I had a website they took down, so I dumped everything onto a blog that I could before they closed my website down, but it's out there. It's called Whistleblowing Airline Employees.blogspot.com, and it's got a ton of letters on there. But what happened after 5 years, I had this thing all the way to the Department of Transportation Inspector General's level, and they told me, well, you didn't comply with this requirement that you submit a report to the Department of Labor within 90 days of your disclosure. So we're closing your file. And they hadn't interviewed a single witness or reviewed any of my solid evidence I had to support my assertions that I was illegally terminated. So 5 years of my life I spent doing this. And if you saw the politician that I had written, I went to New York, I went to Washington, D.C., knocked on doors, talked to staffers in these offices, nothing. And during this time frame, I was working with the Government Accountability Project and the National Whistleblower Center in Washington, D.C., which are two of the largest whistleblower advocacy groups in the world, actually. And late in the ball game, they said, Dan, if you're a federal whistleblower in the United States, you have less than a 2% probability of winning your case. 2%, less than 2%.
Dan, did you just say 2%?
Yeah.
Oh my God, you got to be kidding me. How's that possible?
It's how the mobsters get away with what they do with impunity. They know they can. I was involved working with the National Whistleblower Center, trying to endorse legislation that was coming down the pike that would force them to enact jury trials for whistleblowers that would enable a discovery phase. And it made it through the House, but not the Senate. It was shot down. And why? Because the big money lobbyists come into D.C. They want to sustain the status quo. They don't want to change the whistleblower laws. They like it with just 2% probability of success. And that's how they get away with what they do.
Of course. Well said, Dan. That's exactly right.
And by the way, to tag on what Doug was saying earlier, by the way, about companies, I've always been about, I've always been against corporate corruption, and companies may have to pay fines and penalties, but of course, when they screw up majorly, it's very rare that a CEO goes to prison.
Right.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm going to make a public announcement right now on your show and to the listeners to challenge the new CEO, Carol Tome of UPS. She's a former CEO of Home Depot. And I'm going to say to Carol right now, Carol, I know you're aware of my case. You're a new CEO. You are on the board of directors at UPS. I do believe that you're a woman of, I hope, of integrity and honor. I want to believe that. And UPS violated every single letter in their code of conduct. falsification of FAA records, accuracy in records, integrity, honesty, no retaliation policy. I've got the paper trail to prove it, and that's why they won't let me into a court of law. So guess what, Carol? Let me come see you. I'll fly to Atlanta, all the way across the North Atlantic Ocean. Fellas, I'm living in Germany now because that's the only place I feel safe, because my country has targeted me as a veteran and a 30-year professional flying wide-body jets flawlessly. And so I would love to come back to the United States, and I'd like to meet Carol in person. Let's sit down, Carol. Let's take a look at the evidence. Let's look at Jennifer Robbins, how she was tasked to build a case against me and coerce pilots to lie that had substance abuse problems. And give me a chance to present my case to you personally, to give you the opportunity to reinstate me to my position, make me whole, and set the example to the rest of the UPSers, like I was, a loyal UPSer. They even said during their trumped up hearings, hey, we don't have a problem with your ability, your piloting skills, and safety. It's your behavior. Yeah, my behavior.
Your behavior.
Captain Greene, you not for nothing, but you may want to actually reconsider the way things are actually going on right now in America. You might want to stay in Germany.
I know, you might want to stay there.
Mike, you're right. And let me tell you why. Real quick. You guys got to hear this, and your listeners got to hear this. 18 U.S. Code, if anybody's familiar with it, this is a criminal code in the United States, okay? And the rules are supposed to apply to everybody, okay? All of us. But see, the RICO Act falls under 18 U.S. Code, like many other crimes. And subordination of perjury is a crime under 18 U.S. Code. Perjury is a crime under 18 U.S. Code. Subordination of perjury, for those that might not know what it is, it's basically when you encourage another person to knowingly lie, which the union and the company did. They put these guys that actually needed help, guys that had substance abuse problems. They used these substance abuse problems against them. The FAA knows what's going on. The FAA and the airline have a fancy acronym. It's called the Human Intervention Motivation Study Program, HIMSS, fancy acronym for substance abuse. And they use this program to coerce pilots to lie about their colleagues. And this is what UPS has done over the years. This is their corporate culture, hence the massacres at the San Francisco Gateway, the potential one in Sunnyvale, and the massacre in Birmingham, Alabama. But see, UPS, companies like UPS being the fourth largest dark money donor to people like Mitch McConnell, who's the one that has turned our courts into a cesspool of corruption across the district, circuit, and Supreme Court. I couldn't even get my case heard. I spent $10,000 just to have my briefs printed at the Supreme Court. Go ahead and read them. They're on my link for Truth Be Told at Twitter, and you can see them for yourself. I also sent them to Michael, but this is what you got to hear. So I file a case against this rigged arbitration to have the arbitration award vacated and have my case heard, and finally, have the opportunity to judge the credibility of known perjured witnesses, which is Federal Rules of Civil Procedure 56. I can quote to you Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. I'm a pilot. I shouldn't be able to do that, but you have to, living in the United States of America. Okay, because if you don't tell them what the law is, and that they don't have jurisdiction, they'll do it anyways. And even when you do tell them what the law is, they don't care because they keep it within their little sphere of influence. Well, this is what happened. The district court with the Western District of Kentucky, which Mitch McConnell owns that state, and that's where the UPS headquarters is, he's got his group of corrupt judges there. They're all dirty and rotten to the core. And they recruit these law students out of the two universities at University of Louisville and University of Kentucky, and they identify potential law clerks that will lie, cheat, and steal and not uphold the rule of law and the canon ethics. But they're sharp students. Colton Givens is one of them. Andrew Hagerman's another. And they recruited these punks, and they weren't even a thought in their parents' mind when I was over in Iraq and Kuwait and Djibouti and all over the Middle East, defending the security and freedom of the American people, putting myself in harm's way. Where these guys, now they're lying about a veteran, making up stories, tampering evidence, manufacturing false facts. And so this Colton Givens guy, he writes a decision on behalf of Thomas B. Russell, who's also a FISA judge, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act judge. He's one of the most corrupt judges in our country, and he should be incarcerated for his crimes against U.S. citizens. And nonetheless, he recruits this Colton Givens, and this kid's so stupid, He doesn't change the PDF file name, and it shows who wrote the decision. So now they test your resolve after they put a bunch of nonsense in the decision, and they ignore thousands of material facts in dispute. And you should know, gentlemen, one material fact in dispute garners a jury trial. The only way you get a jury trial in the United States of America is if you kill somebody or somebody kills you. That's the only way you're going to ever see a jury trial in a civil case. The criminal case, they have to give you.
You might have to shoot somebody, Doug. Wow.
Well, I'm not going to do that.
It's a joke. It's a joke. I'm playing. Don't shoot no one. I'm joking around. It's a joke.
I got to clarify everything I say, because anything I say can and will be used against me by United Parcel Service. So
just join BLM. You won't go to jail.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
My
so
God.
Doug,
quit sugarcoating it, Doug.
Okay.
Tell us how you really feel.
Right.
Yeah, I'll tell you how I really. Well, I want you to hear this. This is the most interesting part. You still with me?
Yep.
Okay,
Absolutely.
good.
We're with you, sir. Go ahead.
So you got to hear this. So this Colton Givens kid, and he was promised he's going to be a famous judge someday. Like Mr. Kavanaugh or Neil Gorsuch. And if you look at some of their decisions, they just have devastated labor, and that's what McConnell wanted. That's why he picked them through the Federalist Society and Leonard Leo. And they represent the 1% club. And guess what, guys? It's their club, and we're not in it. But nonetheless, this Givens kid, he writes this false decision. He ignores the rule of law. He ignores federal rules of procedure. There's thousands of exhibits in the record, and if you go to PACER, which is public access to court electronic records, you'll see thousands of material facts in dispute in my case, and they don't want to let me into a courtroom because they know once I do and I put in front of a real jury of people like you and I, they lose.
Oh shit!
So this is a cover-up of the cover-up, and this is how it goes. So guess what? They test my resolve to file an appeal to the circuit court. And, they say, we already ran this guy out of money. He can't afford an attorney or a law firm. And I haven't found an honest law firm that exists because they're all loyal to the legal brethren of the cloth. And so nonetheless, I got to go pro se. And if you look at my briefs, I've had countless people across the country call me and they said, are you an attorney? Do you work for a law firm? I need your help. And I says, no, I'm not. I'm a pilot. I had to learn the law.
Doug's my new lawyer, by the way.
If you look at my briefs, Supreme Court briefs, Douglas Walter Greene with an E, go to the SCOTUS website, put that name in. You'll see them all. And I sent you links, Michael, to them.
Yes,
you
sir.
can see what we've been dealing with.
Right.
But nonetheless, so this Colton Givens guy, he's working contemporaneously. Did you hear the word I just used?
Yes,
That's
sir.
a fancy word.
I love that word, by the way.
Yeah,
oh,
that's
yes.
a great
word.
I noticed it. Don't worry. I noticed it, Doug.
I learned to use their words.
I have my eye on you, Doug. Don't worry.
Contemporaneously. So guess what? He's working for Eugene Seiler at the Sixth Circuit Court contemporaneously, okay? And Eugene Seiler is buddies with Thomas B. Russell, and they both pal around with Mitch McConnell for years. They're directly connected to Frost, Brown, and Todd, which is the Mitch McConnell fish farm for corrupt judges. They're based in Louisville, Kentucky, a huge law firm. Throwing people under the bus with their labor hitman named Tony Coleman, who targets thousands of UPS employees and their families for simply trying to do their job. So this Colton Givens guy, what he does is he's working contemporaneously for Seiler. He writes a fraudulent decision. They want to test my resolve to write an appeal. I do as a pro se litigant, and it was a damn good one. And so subsequently, he guess what? Colton Givens is the guy writing the response to my appeal of his decision that he wrote in the district court. Well, there's a thing called de novo review, and that means anew from the beginning, new eyes, new judges, new law clerks. You got to look at all the pleadings, all the evidence, all the exhibits, witness testimony, which, there never was witness testimony because they never let me, have a trial court to judge the credibility of these guys that lied under deposition. So, this is forbidden. This is absolute fraud, gentlemen. And this should never happen in the United States of America. Colton Givens knows he's guilty. Andrew Hangerman knows he's guilty. Thomas B. Russell knows he's guilty. And Eugene Seiler knows he's guilty. These people have no respect for the law, and it's a mockery of our justice system that anybody should have to go to these lengths and measures to walk into a courtroom simply because I want to do my job and protect the safety and security of the airline industry so that when you get on that airplane and you look to the left of that cockpit, you know you're in good hands. And pilots aren't afraid to call in sick when they're sick. And pilots aren't afraid to get fired if they call in fatigued. Pilots aren't afraid to write up a systems malfunction on a hydraulic system because they want that thing fixed before they fly across the North Atlantic Ocean in case they lose a motor and they have to land at the nearest suitable airport. Wow. But when you do these things as a pilot in this airline industry in the United States of America, under the auspices of enforcement by the FAA, which we have an administrator that was inserted by Mitch McConnell's corrupt wife, former DOT Secretary Elaine Chao. I want my day in court, and I'm going to contact Pete Buttigieg at the DOT. I still have an active case on file with the Department of Labor. It's been sitting on ice for 6 years. This judge threw my case after that corrupt Paul McDevitt never investigated a damn thing, and I filed a petition for an administrative review board. It's been sitting on ice for 6 years.
Well, you know why that was? That's because all the courts in the country were so busy worrying about Donald Trump running the country, they didn't have time for you.
Well, if Mitch McConnell couldn't have inserted all those corrupt judges to make sure that people like you and me never walk into a courtroom, we wouldn't have that problem.
I agree. I'm just saying that I'm exaggerating, of course, but
yeah.
You know what I mean.
McConnell has been the disaster of America. He's an excellent tactician. He set out his objectives to destroy our sacred institutions on behalf of dark money, and he's done a fabulous job. And his wife, Elaine Chao, former DOT secretary, she destroyed labor when she was Secretary of Labor under the Bush administration. She was epically corrupt under the DOT. She's a member of the CCP, the Communist Chinese Party, with her father, James Chao. And of course, if you want to dig deep into it, Dan knows all about, the bailout since 9/11. The consequences of 9/11, gentlemen, have been devastating to the United States of America. And in so many ways, this show would have to continue for quite some time. And the sun's already rose where I'm at, but nonetheless, if you look at the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, hey, guess what? Look who's directing that. Most people don't even know what that is. Most pilots are so stupid, and the problem we have with pilots is that the institutional knowledge is pretty much all gone. The average age of pilots right now is 48. Dan and I and my friends, like my buddies at UPS that know what went on and several others, they say, hey, we're the old timers now. We've lost the institutional knowledge to protect the industry. The companies have figured out how to control the unions, and so we have no enforcement. The FAA is corrupt, and we can only hope that through venues like this, like Dan said, hey, you know what? We're the good guys. We're fighting to show the truth, to make our country great again. Okay, and so to reinstitute sacred institutions that really do have honesty, integrity, decency. There is no decency. It doesn't exist. It's a shameful nation. Richard Blumenthal said every American deserves their day in court. Well, I'll tell you what, Richard Blumenthal, I'm still waiting for mine. And I have more than enough evidence, and I deserve it, and I want it. And I won't rest until it happens.
Oh my, an explosive rant here by an explosive rant here by Doug Greene. My God, wow. That was pretty wild there. Yes, it was. Gotta play the horn there for Doug Greene, like we're on some sort of hip hop radio show. Yes.
I forgot to tell you one thing. I'm actually having a blast, you guys. I actually forgot to tell you, when it comes to the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, this is all about the golden parachutes that guys like, you talked earlier, and you made a really great point, Michael. You talked about unity of 9/11 after 9/11,
right?
And how they used it as propaganda, and it did. It worked. It brought Americans together.
It really did.
Just like after World War II, the same thing happened. And back then, a lot of the corporations appreciated the employees and the labor and the workers, and they started to institute pension benefit plans. And Dan knows all about the pension benefit plans because that's why he lost $4 million in retirement as a result of 9/11.
That's a lot of money.
They used that as a reset to raid the pension funds and to take away these golden parachutes for guys like us that have worked so diligently as staunch professionals to protect the flying public. And so now guess who's running the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation, the director of that program. Well, it just happens to be none other than Gordon Harto Genesis, who is Mitch McConnell's brother-in-law, who's married to Grace Chow of the Chow family, directly linked to Elaine Chow and Mitch McConnell. And Mitch McConnell doesn't give a damn about this country. He sold it out to China on behalf of the CCP and his wife and his family, and James Chow, who runs the Foremost Group, which is the largest shipping company, alleged to be headquartered in Manhattan.
Alleged,
but he has a 25-story office building in Shanghai, China, and all of his routes run to countries all over the world for raw resources and materials to feed the war machine for China. And all of his ships are built in communist Chinese naval shipyards and funded by Chinese banks.
Oh my,
So,
Doug, I got to ask you this, and this is a little bit different, though. I mean, we're kind of going off the rails here ever so slightly, Doug, but I do have to throw this in there. As you know, we are having some conflict with China. We are seeing they have a conflict with Taiwan. It seems like a war with China over the island of Taiwan appears pretty imminent.
Taiwan and Hong Kong.
What do you make of that, Doug? Do you think we're actually going to go to war? Are we going to see the same way that we united, I guess you could say, after 9/11? Are we going to see that with China in the near future?
Well, personally for me, that's a little bit above my pay grade. But from my own observations, if you look at the national debt clock, the chances for the United States of America to go to war with China are highly unlikely, because we're indentured servitude to China because of the enormous debt that they own us.
We're a little embedded with them. Yes, that is true, Doug.
They own us.
If I may just interject for a moment, I was just watching something today from a subscription I have on YouTube from this guy who does a lot of fact checking, and I kind of believe what he said. He's a decent man. He explained how that if World War III is to come into play, the possibilities of there being a nuclear war, first off, are probably slim to none, and it's because both sides know total annihilation. If they hit us, we're going to hit them, and it's all over. So it's probably going to be some sort of a tech war where there'll be they could shut down power grids and the possibility of clean water or something like that. No internet, no things of that nature. So I sincerely doubt there would be any sort of nuclear war, but I do believe there would be a cyber tech war. If it did elevate, see, the thing is, I mean, one of the key instigators, in my opinion, is Iran. Iran is going to attack Israel. As a result, we would back Israel, and then Russia and China would back Iran. So even though these two countries have great armies, giant armies, it is America and the Second Amendment that prevents these countries from invading us. Because even though we have less people in the army, or the military, I should say, countries like China know, and they have even said it. We can't invade a country like America because we know there's too many Americans who stand with their guns, and that's probably how I see it. So there is a great possibility that we are going to go to war with China because of what's happening. I have a great fear of that, and that's all I had to say.
Good point. Well taken. What do you think about that, Dan?
Well, I haven't really followed the China situation that closely. I do subscribe to Brendan O'Connell's YouTube channel, if you know who he is, and we were tagging around last year, and he keeps me apprised of what I need to know. But I agree with you that Iran is aligned with Russia and China, and that is a catalyst in the Middle East that could precipitate a war sometime in the future. So I haven't been following that close because I've been busy with other matters that I'm dealing with right now. But if I could just one more time mention on our website at 911pilots.org, we got this Join Us page. We're getting people from all over the world joining us via our website. And all we need is your first name, last name, email address, and then there's a comments box there. And if you're a pilot, we ask that you put in the type aircraft you flew, and we'll get in touch with you, hopefully, and set up one of these interviews that we're conducting. But if you'd like to contact Doug and I, you can fill in that same page, and we'll get your email address, and we'll get in touch with you. If you're a program host and would like to interview us or anything like that, just do the same thing. So the things I can plug this because they're not out yet, but I've written a book. It's called Grounded, a true story of a 9/11 pilot whistleblower. And in it, I go into detail explaining, it's actually a memoir and maybe kind of boring at the beginning because it just talks about my whole flying career. But I go into other issues concerning 9/11, and I'm going to have to, we're self-publishing. I'm working with a couple other people on this because it's too controversial. Nobody will pick it up. No mainstream publisher will pick it up.
Right.
But the other thing in Pakistan we're doing is producing a documentary that's entitled 9/11, The Advent of the Ninth Crusade. There were 8 major crusades, and we claim that 9/11 was the catalyst that brought about the Ninth Crusade. And there again, we will have problem keeping that up online on YouTube or any other outlet like that because it's got a lot of highly controversial information in it. And finally, I was thinking that a whole new generation has been born since 9/11.
That's right.
I mean, today's college students were only 1 to 4 years old on 9/11 and have only been fed the government mainstream media and school propaganda. So I'm contemplating in the fall, if I don't get my head blown off doing it, going on a speaking tour to colleges in Pakistan. There's about 160 of them. And I'm sure that my message that there were no Muslim hijackers of the controls of the 9/11 aircraft will resonate well amongst 200 million Muslims. People don't realize that Pakistan, the second most densely populated Muslim country in the world next to Indonesia, they've got 200 million people here. So that's the other thing I'm planning on doing. And I managed to get back on Facebook. I was taken off for posting 9/11 stuff for about 9 months, but I'm on Facebook at Dan Hanley, and I'm on Twitter at Dan Hanley4. So if you want to join me on those 2 social media platforms, I'd appreciate it.
Understood. And of course, I did want to sort of run through a few different things that the chat room was asking about in terms of sort of theories surrounding 9/11. And one of these very popular theories that we often hear about, rather, is from Dr. Judy Wood. I'm not sure how familiar you are with her, Dan, or Doug, for that matter, but yeah, someone in the chat, I think it was David Rubini, who was asking about that. What exactly are your thoughts and opinions on her work? Starting with you, Dan.
I didn't read her book. I think it's Where Have the Buildings Gone or something like that. But I am familiar with her directed energy weapon hypothesis. And I just posted something the other day. You got to look at the Twin Towers. Over 100,000 tons of steel and concrete were dustified from 110 stories up down to the surface, unimpeded, no resistance, to a pile of rubble 1 story tall. And I know there's the theories about nanothermite, and I strongly support that hypothesis that it was a controlled demolition and that nanothermite was employed. And I know that the lawyers committee did not allow Dr. Wood to present her evidence to the grand jury because they said that she doesn't have enough facts to back her assertions. But when I look at the dustified steel and concrete, I don't believe it was just nanothermite. I believe something else had to come into play there for that to have occurred.
Yes. You believe there was more to it. And of course, for those that don't know, Dr. Judy Wood, she has the theory that direct energy weapons, space beams rather, brought down the two towers in Building 7 on 9/11. Lots of people do subscribe to that theory. Doug, what are your thoughts and opinions on that?
I got to be honest with you. I have no knowledge of Dr. Judy Wood.
No worries, no worries.
I do have some knowledge of, some of Niels Harrit's work. Niels Harrit was a professor from the University of Copenhagen in Denmark, and maybe you guys have heard about Niels Harrit. He was actually, when the third building dropped, and it's funny because I ask a lot of people, and I asked them this question on purpose. I said, how many buildings were taken down as a result of 9/11? And just about everybody rolls in on the word twin towers.
Right,
says,
right.
No, there was a third building that dropped. And I try to educate them on the fact that it was the Salomon Brothers building, and it dropped many, many hours after the initial impact. And Dan knows better than I do. What's the narrative on that, Dan, that they say it was a result of office fires from the Twin Tower buildings that,
initially they said that, and then the lawyers committee and architects and engineer brought in information, and then they backed off and said, well, no, there was a structural beam on one corner of the building that gave way and caused it. Well, the University of Alaska at Fairbanks did a 4-year study, and it's the National Institute of Standards and Technology that's representing the government that's trying to stonewall the lawyers committee and the architects and engineers and others on this. But the study that was conducted by the University of Alaska using computer modeling has conclusively proven that 44 structural beams collapsed almost simultaneously, which would indicate a controlled demolition, and not just as one beam that missed. And that's where it stands right now. And that's where the Department of Justice and NIST are up against the wall. And like I said, it would be a slam dunk case if they got to be for a grand jury. It would be all over. And I applaud the lawyers committee and that whole group that's doing that work, and hope we can join them ourselves as pilots next year. But the system is so corrupt. I mean, even what we're doing with the FAA, the system is so corrupt, and they cannot allow the truth to come out. There'd be riots in the street. So I'm going to run the full gamut with our organization all the way to the top and exhaust all possibilities and see where the chips fall.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. And we are coming to a close very soon here, and there's still more theories being asked about. And of course, the no planes theory is a very popular theory out there. Dan, I'm not quite sure how you feel about that, nor do I know how you feel about that, Doug. Some people say it was
What is that, Michael? What is that?
They're saying it was like a projection of sorts, like a hologram. It was not a plane per se. That's what some people.
How could that be?
Some people believe all kinds of things. But go ahead, Dan or Doug. Go ahead.
I know all about the CGI. I've seen the photographs. I've seen the films. I've seen the nose coming out the other side of the air. The Twin Towers, which was impossible. I've seen the picture of the wing disappearing on the film coming in, the left wing disappearing on it, okay? So I know where they're coming from, but we don't go there with our organization. We don't say what happened on 9/11. We're saying what could not have happened, and that is the hijackers couldn't have flown the airplane. Now, I personally do not subscribe to the no planes theory for a number of reasons. I mean, I feel like there are too many eyewitness accounts seeing an airplane striking the buildings, but I don't debate that issue anymore. I used to on social media, and I got tired of getting beat up by people trying to prove their point. So I don't even go there anymore, Michael.
I had a personal friend who was walking to work and saw it actually happen. So
hey, Dan, just to piggyback on that a little bit, to share with Michael and Mike in the audience a little bit about the 767 and the configuration with the pod in the bottom in the picture, so they understand what possibly could have contributed to that.
Okay, we're almost out of time, but I'll try to make it quick. There are four photos taken independently by 4 different photographers of United Flight 175 striking the South Tower, and all 4 photos have this long cylindrical pod on the bottom of the body of the aircraft, okay? And a Spanish photography expert analyzed the photos and said, no, it wasn't Photoshop. The photos are too grainy, and it wasn't a shadow cast by the engine or by the sun. The pod is really there. Well, there are those who believe, including Rebecca Roth, that's published 3 books on 9/11 called Methodical Illusion, Methodical Deception, and Methodical Conclusion, that there was an airborne swap of aircraft using the uninterruptible autopilot system over Stewart Air Force Base, and the planes with passengers were directed to, I can't think of the name of the New England airport, and forced to make phone calls, and then were snuffed. So I don't disagree with her or agree with her on that. It's her belief, and there's other people that believe the aircraft swap theory. But if you look at a character named Dov Zakheim goes back to the Reagan administration, where he served in various capacities. He's a dual U.S.-Israeli citizen that has strong leanings towards Israel, okay? And he was Bush's foreign policy advisor coming into the 2000 election and worked in the Defense Department. But he was also the CEO of a company called System Planning Corporation that developed a system called the Flight Termination System that Rebecca Roth mentions in her book, okay? And this system was designed to abort, say an example, abort a malfunctioning missile test launch. Okay, they launch a missile and it misfires, and they got to drive it away. So it takes remote control of the airborne vehicle and drives it where they want to. So if you look at a photograph of the flight termination system, it is a long cylindrical pod. So some people say that wasn't United 175 that hit it. It was a swapped airplane with the flight termination system.
Yeah.
And again, I don't go there because I can't prove or disprove that to be the case, but the photos do exist.
Understand.
And I've seen them.
Yeah, I have too. And I think that's an interesting theory, but like you said, we can't prove it. So,
right.
But one of the things I just really wanted to emphasize, 9/11 was just the conduit that they used. Just like Pearl Harbor, just like with deregulation, 9/11. Now we got COVID. These are all resets, and in my opinion, this is a deeper state of corruption in the United States of America. I've seen it for myself firsthand. I've experienced it, but it's the consequences of 9/11 that we're faced with, the consequences. And people don't really think about these consequences. But Noam Chomsky, I'm sure you guys heard of Chomsky and you're familiar with some of his work. He actually, there's a article that he wrote, or it might have been a book, but I did some extensive research on it. It's called The Requiem of the American Dream. And in that writing, he talked about how they will try to how a deeper state of the 1% club that we're not in, we're the 99% slaves, and they expect us to follow the rule of law, but they don't. And this is how they do it. They run the regulators. And as a consequence of 9/11, the airline industry, to include the airlines, aircraft manufacturers, servicers, you name it, they found a way through people like McConnell and his dark money donors to put in a revolving door of corruption to run the regulators. And this is what Chomsky said. He said, run the regulators. Those regulated, run the regulators via regulatory capture, writing their own legislation through the lobbyists and dark money. This is an unequal distribution of power. Okay, well, just if you talk about that power and the consequences of it, Citizens United legislation in 2010 is one of those consequences of power. Okay, and a lot of people, they hear that word Citizens United, and just for the listeners, I want to qualify that for them. It's a real pretty word, just like the Patriot Act. Hey, guess what? Patriotism, dun, 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 the TAPS Act, doo, 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 doo. Flags waving, Citizens United. But guess what, guys? Citizens United is a misnomer. It's not about citizens. It's about corporations and dark money influence that basically was identified. Money's free speech. Well, guess what? 99% slaves, we don't got the money. The 1% does. And they want to say that their money, their billions, is free speech. And we can use it against you slaves to keep you in check. So you never get to use your sacred institutions. My friends, here in other parts of the world, they say to me, but Captain, the United States is a land of life, liberty, and justice for all. I said, well, why do you think that? And he said, well, I saw it on Law and Order. I said, it's for show. This is TV. That's why they call it a show. This doesn't happen in the United States because we don't have these rights and freedoms anymore. And Citizens United legislation, Jimmy Carter in an interview, he's probably one of the last honest presidents we had. He gave an interview a couple years ago, and they asked him, what's the state of the union? He said, it's the worst demise it's ever been since the Civil War. They said, why? He said, since the passing of Citizens United legislation by the U.S. Supreme Court, it's basically legalized bribery to the highest bidder to get whatever you want, whoever you want, in positions of power. And the four pillars, I've talked to another friend of mine, who's involved in this, and he's directly linked to he's directly linked into our group and what's going on and the levels of corruption. He's also another whistleblower with Securities and Exchange Commission fraud that's directly also linked to McConnell and his cronies back in Kentucky. And he said, you know what we're faced with, guys? We're faced with syndicated crime. And the four pillars of syndicated crime are Citizens United legislation, legalized bribery, and the no term limits, the need to end judicial life-term appointments of corrupt judges and do something about this electoral college. He said those are the four pillars of corruption that deny our people, average Americans, to the elite, to the opulent, the 1% club. We're the slaves, and this is how they deny us our rights and freedoms that guys like me and Dan fought for years. To only find out they don't exist.
Right.
It's the great American lie.
That's right. The American dream. Just you have to be asleep to experience it.
It's a nightmare. American nightmare, right, man?
It's my personal belief that the administration, let me just put it this way, the elites who run the country and or the world, it is my personal belief that this country has been infiltrated, if you will,
right,
by certain individuals in high positions in power, and have gotten into the position of our government and are making the changes. I mean, I don't know how much you guys are keeping up on what's going on out here, but I mean, there is a definite with the administration we have now running the country, there is a definite possibility that they're moving towards a socialism type of country. I mean, our corpse of a president who can't remember his own name at times has recently he's going to have spent $6 trillion in 4 months. I mean, that's unheard of. We've already passed budgets that it's beyond. They are trying to bankrupt this country. I mean, not to get off the subject of what we're talking about here, guys, but I mean, the world is in a shithole right now.
Right.
Especially this country. And without this country, who polices practically every country in the world, I mean, we have been the superpower. Without America running it the right way, we are not going to be in charge anymore. And if we are, I think it would be a ploy, a stage show, if you will. So things are bad all over, and I don't see anything getting any better. And they just keep handing out money and spending money. I mean, what's our deficit at? Like $30 trillion?
I don't think anyone really cares anymore, to be honest.
Nope, exactly.
Yeah.
No one gives a shit. Yeah.
Well, it's out of control. What are you going to say or do about it? There's nowhere to turn. What are you going to do? Write your politicians and then complain about it? Nobody's going to listen to you. I know we're going to close out the program here, Michael.
Oh, we still got a little bit of. We still got a few more minutes to go. It's okay. Go ahead. We're good. We're good.
Okay. I think the problem that we have in the United States, if not the world, is we're living in a police state. With the advent of NSA illegal wiretap, the Patriot Act, Homeland Security, people's fear that the FBI is going to come in, kick their door down, and take their laptop computer and arrest them and all that. People are afraid to speak out. And all I can say is in spite of the 2% figure I quoted you on whistleblowers, do it anyhow. because the only way we're going to be able to turn it around is if enough people start speaking out. I mean, the censorship going on in social media right now indicates how concerned they are that we're all out talking to one another. And I'm pretty outspoken, so I may get taken off Facebook and Twitter.
You might
again.
You and us both.
That might happen. Yeah, you never know. And go ahead.
But I appreciate, Michael, that you have programs like this, because the corporate-owned, I should say Zionist-owned and controlled mainstream media has such a lockdown and is spewing out such propaganda. And Doug and I would never get our day before a mainstream media camera, or if we did, they'd crucify us and call us a couple of idiots. So our last bastion of hope are programs like this. Still go out on social media. If you are someone out there that has sees wrongdoing, go on a program like Michael's or any of the other programs out there and talk about this stuff, because we got to get the word out to people, because too many people are sleeping, too many people are afraid.
I agree. And I would feel remiss if we did not mention Flight 77, by the way. I mean, they want us to believe that, they want us to believe this, just the still image that we have of the Pentagon being hit. That's all we really have. So you're telling me the most surveillance any building probably has in the world, the Pentagon, yet we only have this one, we only have a few still images of this plane that struck the side of the Pentagon. Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Before and after.
Yeah, before and after. That's always a strange one, in my opinion. Doug, I know you feel the same way too.
Oh yeah.
Oh yes. It's very strange. Go ahead, Dan.
I've heard it all. I've heard missiles struck the Pentagon. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, it's not a plausible story. Like I said, my buddy's parents were alleged to be on the airplane, and Admiral Flagg was a Naval Reserve officer, but he also, at the same time, worked for American Airlines. He was a very senior captain out of the Los Angeles crew base, and they were flying back. He was retired, but they were flying back to the West Coast to visit their children. And so, what really happened there is very disconcerting. But if it wasn't for efforts like Captain Dan Hanley, and for shows like the Michael Decon Show, and your co-hosts, Mike, and people like you that provide an alternative venue for Americans to share their thoughts and their ideas and their grievances that are not being heard by our government. They don't care about us. If they'll kill 3,000 people to promote their dark money agenda, and we know what the reasons are. There's so many reasons. Benjamin Franklin said something very interesting, and we shall think about this. He didn't say America. He said any society that's willing to give up a little bit of liberty for a little bit of security deserves neither and will lose both. And so this whole thing's been a staged show. They wanted to put fear that the homeland's being attacked, just like Pearl Harbor, and you need our security. But in order for us to give you security, you have to be willing to give up your liberty. It's funny. I ask people, tell me what liberty means to you in one word. And they're like, It's kind of like the Jay Leno show. And he goes, formerly in the Jay Leno show, and he'd go out and interview people. He'd say, hey, we just want to see what people's knowledges of geography. Can you tell us one country that starts with the letter U? And they're like, how about the United States? How about the United Kingdom, Uruguay, the UAE? Come on. It's pathetic. And so, I
Europe.
Yeah, exactly. I ask people, I say, tell me what liberty means to you in one word. And when they start the ho-hum, and like on the Jay Leno show, I say, well, let me give you a clue. It starts with the letter F, And then finally, some people say it, freedom. I says, yeah, they want you to give up your freedom, which most of your freedom's already been taken from you. You just don't know it because nothing bad's happened to you yet. And so what did they do? They instituted the Patriot Act. And Mitch McConnell just covertly reaffirmed it with all the distractions and nonsense, like watching the Kardashians on mainstream media It's unbelievable.
Right.
He's slipping in, renewing the Patriot Act, but he uses a different name. He conceals it, just like they conceal everything else, like Citizens United. It's not about Citizens United. It's about corporations united to screw the citizens.
Right, and of course,
rights and freedoms.
Doug, I have to jump in here really quickly and say we do have a caller here, and I think he has a question for either you or Doug. I mean, you or Dan rather. Caller, you are live. Go ahead. What's on your mind?
Hey guys, I really enjoy this great interview. I have actually a couple questions, so
go ahead.
I'll stick around as long as you guys want to keep me, but I have like 3 or 4 or 5 questions. Regarding the no planes, I just want to throw this out there and see if you guys are open to it. A lot of people, all the kind of interviews that you would see on, CNN, Fox, they were pretty much rehearsed crisis actor, kind of green screen type interviews with like the quote unquote Harley man. Have you guys ever seen that famous little clip of the Harley man? He was the guy that gave the first major, like on the spot, like impromptu, supposedly a question and answer interview from a witness. You guys know about the Harley man?
Are you talking about 9/11, right?
Yeah, we're going back to 9/11.
Very vaguely, I do recall a story of someone like that, either that or, of course, the firefighter that we all heard talk about explosions. Everyone heard his account, but yes, early on I did hear of that, but it was sort of like something you hear and then
my point was that
go ahead.
One of the journalists said that they didn't think that that could be orchestrated, but you don't want to go too far out. But with some people believe with that school shooting in Connecticut, I don't want to get your channel banned or whatever, but the blank hook incident,
right?
A lot of that could have been pre-recorded, staged, and same thing goes like there's a lot of crisis actors out there for some of these events. If you believe these theories, which you definitely do. I mean, I could really show you. I'm sure they've seen them, but if not, there is some really great footage to be seen. But anyways, that's one idea. Just going to pipe in some sound, and a lot of experts have shown that it looked very CGI. Also, but what I wanted to ask them, they were talking about architects and engineers. A lot of people think that they could be disinfo. I've booked them on shows myself, and very knowledgeable. But it's kind of like one of the people in chat put, it's 90% accurate, but 10% disinfo. It's like a house of cards. So
yeah, there's been some arguments about just that, what you are mentioning, the fact that they don't really tell you or they don't really disclose who they think is responsible for anything. They sort of gloss over that fact. But yes, I agree with you.
Well, I know Richard Gage.
I wanted to ask them, have they heard about...
Oh, go ahead.
Have you guys heard about this helicopter pilot that supposedly developed the software for real-time CGI insertion? And he got supposedly knocked. I mean, I just don't have all my facts, so I'm saying supposedly, but I believe it to be accurate, where he developed and was live, the one controlling like the main footage for ABC, CBS, NBC, Fox, CNN, and he inserted the plane going through the building where the nose pops out from one of those angles. And long story short, he ended up getting knocked off a few years ago. Are you guys familiar at all with that?
With this guy's work? No, I'm familiar with the nose popping out.
Or that theory, that gentleman was he developed the software for CGI real-time insertion from a helicopter. He was a helicopter pilot, and he got knocked off, because people were asking too many questions, and he was giving too many answers.
Wow.
Anyways, that's just really very interesting because it does support the no planes. But hey, if there were planes, great. But anyways,
and you can't hear a word you're saying.
Last question.
There we go.
You guys are pilots. I know this is very controversial. Depending on where you're sitting, it could be the craziest question ever asked from the brainwashing and
we are losing this call
that
here.
We've all been through.
Mind control.
Caller, stop moving around. You got a really bad connection. We can't hear you.
Your phone is just shit.
Are you familiar with the flat Earth theory?
Yes, I am.
God.
I'm familiar with it.
Unfortunately.
I mean, that's the point of the question. I know it's the craziest question ever. However, some pilots have looked into it, and they swear up and down by it. There's infrared aerial photography from airplanes right now where you can see 500 to 700 miles away. If the Earth is a spherical object, we do, science provides us a calculation of how to, it's 8 inches per mile squared, and there should be like a big, massive, piece of the Earth between you and that object. You shouldn't be able to see it, even though they're very high up. With infrared photography, they can see way too far away for it to be a spherical Earth. Are you guys open to that? Have you seen any of this infrared
I respect your
photography?
beliefs, but I don't subscribe to that theory at all. I've heard people come to me all the time and ask me, and I don't even debate it anymore. I've heard all their arguments, but I respect what you're saying and understand where you're coming from.
These are pilots. They've flown around the world.
Yeah, we fly great circle routes,
That's the point. I love that you guys are laughing. One of these days, you might figure it out. I'll be the one laughing, but I love you guys.
Amazing.
God bless America.
Take care. And there he goes. Yes, flat Earth. I'm sure you hear it all the time, Dan and Doug.
Yes, I don't debate it. I've heard all their arguments, so it's just like the no planes. I don't debate it because it's not relevant to the work we're doing at 911pilots.org. We got a real simple statement that's attacking the official narrative, and that is the pilots couldn't have flown the aircraft. Whether or not there were aircraft or not, whether or not there was an aircraft swap, we're just making that statement and saying it was the uninterruptible autopilot.
Right. And Doug, your thoughts and opinions on the flat Earth model?
Well, like I say, we fly great circle routes, so I subscribe to Dan's response.
The flat Earth, they have many subscribers around the world, indeed.
I mean, you think about it, Michael, too, and gentlemen, we've even sent people out into space, and they go around the orbit of the Earth.
Space is fake, by the way, Mike. You know that.
Right. Yes, I forgot.
You can't get past the firmament, by the way, that's covering the Earth.
One of the things I will say, though, is I really respect, people that, have their own thoughts and opinions, and they're not afraid to ask questions, and like I always tell, the young pilots that I mentor, which I constantly do on a regular basis. I said, the first thing I say to them before we start our flight, especially if we've never flown together, I tell them, I said, from a crew resource management standpoint, we've never flown together before. But it's very important that you are not afraid to ever speak up or ask a question. There's not a dumb question. And I tell them, I says, it's easier to ask a question than it is to ask for forgiveness later. So don't be afraid to ask a question about any thoughts or ideas you might have.
My goodness.
Questions are one thing, but I mean, when the science has proved, I mean, there's so much science out there to prove.
That's true.
I mean, that's just conspiracy, what it is.
Yeah.
Well, I think that's going beyond conspiracy, to be honest. But anyways,
for me and Dan, for Dan and I, guys, what we're trying to stay focused on is not so much on, we want to stay focused on the reality. Okay. When we talk about conspiracy, okay, well, it's a word and there's a definition behind that word. And I think that they've tried to diminish the meaning of the word with, quote, conspiracy theory. Conspiracy is when two or more people come together with the sole intent to do something devious and diabolic that they know is wrong. And so the conspiracy reality is what we're faced with here. This is a reality where people have come together, do something diabolically wrong because the 1% club can never get enough money and power. It's never enough. Their greed is insatiable. They have to have more. It's an addiction, and so this is for guys like Dan and I and people like you, Michael,
yes,
and Mike, coming out and offering a venue for us to speak to people and let them know the truth about the demise of our country and that we have no rights and freedoms. We want to make people aware. Knowledge is power. We want people to know that we're being denied basic rights. And these politicians, these political operatives and these corrupt judges and organizations like the Federalist Society and corrupt law clerks and people that break the rule of law, and there is no rule of law. People need to be aware of this so we can come together with a loud voice and not give up that freedom that Benjamin Franklin talked about. We're not going to give that freedom up. We don't want your security.
Captain Greene, here's a sad thing when you think about it. In many cases throughout history, empires have, let's take for a perfect example, the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire, I believe, lasted for 300 years until it collapsed as a result of what I consider to be a lax in their ability to control things. They got too comfortable, sort of spread themselves too thin. Boom, they fell apart. Same thing happened with the Mayans. They exhausted their what's the word?
The resources, yes.
Their resources. Thank you. So I hope this never happens, but I'm going to bring it up. It seems to me that the possibility of America falling to some extent, if you will, is very great. I mean, we've been doing the country as a free country.
All empires fall, indeed. You're right.
Exactly. So we've been over 200 years. The possibility of it happening is very close. And it's all because there's so many people in the world now. The world, and it's become smaller with the internet. It's crazy what's going on. 100 years ago, we had 1.5 billion. In 100 years, we have gotten 6 billion more people.
Yeah, this COVID thing needs to hurry up. We got too many people here. Yeah. We got to get rid of people here. Got a lot of bodies here. But yes, Mike, I agree with you. We are going down that line of notion. Indeed, history does repeat itself. Things come in cycles and waves. We see this all the time. It's only a matter of time, per se, that America does fall to a great extent, Mike. Yes, it's about that time. Sure. Amazing. I'm not sure if you agree with that, Dan or Doug, but I do have a special treat for all of you out there. I did find the clip that I meant to play earlier from our friend Bill Cooper. Let's play that clip. I'm not sure if Mike has ever heard this, so this will be a treat for him. This is back in 2001, by the way. Let's this is before 9/11. For those that don't know.
Supposedly, a CNN reporter found Osama bin Laden, took a television camera crew with him, went into Osama bin Laden's hideout, interviewed him and his top leadership, and he came out and told everybody, within 3 weeks, Osama bin Laden is going to attack the United States and Israel. Now, don't you think that's kind of strange, folks? You see, because the largest intelligence apparatus in the world, with the biggest budget in the history of the world, has been looking for Osama bin Laden for years and years and years, and can't find him. Some doofus jerk-off reporter with a camera crew bosses right into his hideout and interviews him. And I'm telling you, be prepared for a major attack. But it won't be Osama bin Laden. It will be those behind the New World Order.
That was June 28th, by the way. The clip's not over yet, but this is June 28th, 2001. Let's keep going.
Michael,
yes.
Where did you find this? And how is it still on the internet?
Magic, I guess. Here we go.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing.
I wonder what Osama bin Laden's targets are supposed to be. And if they don't, if this doesn't materialize in the next 2 or 3 weeks, it will eventually materialize because they haven't succeeded in getting the guns out of the hands of the American people, nor have they succeeded in taking our freedoms away. And so I can tell you with a certainty, they must do something terrible in order to stop this backlash and regain the sympathy of the mass herds of sheeple out there.
So yes, that was way before September 11th. Bill Cooper was talking about that. It's pretty interesting for those that have not heard that. Dan and Doug, go ahead if you have anything to
Did
say.
I hear him say the mass herds of sheeple?
That's right. Yes, sir.
Well said.
Yes, he was on the ball way back then. Yes, sir.
That is shocking.
Yes. Very shocking.
I gotta say, I am. If that, I don't know where you got that, but I'm assuming you got that off the internet. And
yes, that's a broadcast from Bill Cooper, Hour of Time.
Was that internet or television?
That was on the radio and online.
Radio.
Yes.
Wow, you gotta admit, man.
June 28th, 2001.
I can't even believe that's even still being passed around. If indeed they were trying to hide this, because I mean, that's amazing.
It is. Oh yes, but just like 9/11 and just like COVID, our government knew way ahead, and there were all kinds of drills going on that morning of 9/11, and of course, there were all sorts of war games going on that day, and just like COVID, there were all sorts of military exercises going on when the first outbreak happened too. Yeah. What a coincidence, right? Wow.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Yes, just like Ebola. No, there's no real answer for the origins of where it came from, why it started, what happened. No one really knows, just like COVID-19. It's a big mystery, right? Wow. Wow, yeah. Big mystery. I say that with quotations around that, by the way. Big mystery.
Yeah. I could tell your sarcasm.
We hear it.
Yes.
And we agree.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's all a bit of a shit show, ladies and gentlemen. It's always been a bit of a political masquerade of sorts. The wool has always been pulled over your eyes. But now it's a lot much more obvious now, Doug.
Yeah, it is. And it's really an insult to the intelligence of the majority of the population. They think we're a bunch of dumbasses. And and Americans should get to the point where they basically say, I've had enough. We've had enough. We're not taking it anymore.
Yeah, we're starting to see some of that, though. Americans are starting to sort of take a stand, per se. But once we start fighting corporate corruption, that's when I will fully be on board with most of America, as I am quite apathetic towards humanity, Doug. I have to confess. I enjoy watching the world burn sometimes, Doug. I'm an evil man, I guess you can say. I guess I'm terrible. I'm just being honest. And that's what gets me in trouble, my honesty. This is no different, Doug. But yes, Captain Dan Hanley and Captain Doug Greene, it was a complete honor to have both of you here and to tell us about your stories
and thank you for your service.
Yes, sir.
Oh, well, thank you both for having us on the program. I appreciate it a bunch.
This was exciting.
Yes. We do appreciate it, and thank you for taking the time to extend your appreciation for our service, because in general, for me, I feel like my service was tarnished, and it was spit on and by my own government that wouldn't even allow a person like me with an honorable record in the military, highly decorated military officer, and an exemplary captain with thousands and thousands of hours and years of experience, and I can't even walk into a courtroom. And I got to spend $500,000
wow.
and go bankrupt my family and file briefs all the way to the United States Supreme Court to only be ignored because they know that this case is a slam dunk if it's put in front of a jury trial. But that won't happen.
Yeah,
we're still hopeful, but it's not likely. And if it's not likely, gentlemen and listeners, there's something wrong with the United States of America.
Well, I'm going to send a link to this program to the FAA and every government email address that I have.
Yep.
Yeah, that'd be nice.
Good.
Please do that, yes. You want everyone to hear this, even if you have to clip up the show, what we talked about, and send it to all sorts of people. Send it to people's employers. I don't care. Go ahead.
Yes, I'm really hopeful that you do that, Nan. Because I think it needs to get to the upper echelons of the Department of. Well, when you talk about it, just for a second, we're talking about the regulators. The Department of Labor. We got Marty Walsh, who's up there now. Okay, Marty. Well, I got a case that's been sitting on ice, waiting for an ARB to have the evidence beyond reasonable doubt put in front of a tribunal, a real tribunal. for honest adjudication. Let's ask Marty Walsh how that's going. Why am I still waiting 6 years? Let's talk to Pete Buttigieg at the Department of Transportation,
Right.
and ask him. Say, hey Pete, how about an IG investigation? And you have jurisdiction of the FAA. How about an investigation on why the Department of Labor never submitted documents to the FAA, and even when the FAA questioned it, they just rubber stamped fraudulent findings by Paul McDevitt at the Department of Labor. Why did they rubber stamp that? Pete, I'm asking you for your help here, okay? I faithfully served just like you did in the military. You're now Secretary of the Department of Transportation, and we need a full investigation into this case and into Dan's case and into other pilots' cases like Gerald Brown,
Yep.
Carlene Pettit, and we need your help. And if you're the real deal, then you're going to make that happen.
The real deal Holyfield, right.
Yeah. That's what we're faced with. And as far as the FAA, I'd like to know why Steve Dixon is still sitting as the FAA administrator. We have a new regime now. Maybe it appears it's supposedly a friendlier administration. But if that's the case, why is Steve Dixon still sitting as the sitting administrator?
Yeah, people need to call up and ask that question, Doug. They need to call right now and say, why is he even there? Why is he being paid? Who hired him?
Well,
I spoke with Carlene Pettit a few times, and Delta is appealing the judge's decision in her case.
And what's your speculation on that?
I'm not overly confident that she's going to win. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you. I just thought the audience and Michael and Mike should hear. What's your speculation on how that's going to go down?
I don't know. You think they're really going to let the FAA administrator take a hit? I mean, he's
Not
claiming when he was deposed, he's claiming he had no knowledge of her case when he was at Delta Airlines.
They're going to tell Doug to kick rocks and tell his story, story walking. That's what they're going to say to Doug.
Yeah, probably. Yeah. Absolutely. Just like, they tried to do to Carlene. I'm pretty sure they're going to overturn the decision. And this is how it's going to go down, fellas, in my opinion. And you should hear this, because this is the buzz phrase that they use. They have created a chilling effect on pilots and those that work in the airline industry. Not just pilots. We have mechanics, we have ground handlers, flight attendants. They have created a chilling effect,
right,
to warn labor, the slaves, that you will keep your mouth shut. Whistleblowers and whistleblower programs are designed to identify people that are willing to come forward with the truth so that we can target and terminate them and make sure that, and we send an example of these individuals to the rest of the laborers, that you will keep your mouth shut. We don't care about safety. We don't care about security. We just care about profits and the shareholders. That's the bottom line. And so what they're going to do is they're going to reverse this. They're going to say, well, wait a minute. We can't. Delta Airlines is an airline, and we can't, even though we believe, in quotes, that Carlene Pettit may have had a medical problem, and they knew she didn't. It was just a ruse. But we believe that maybe she did, and so therefore, even though it was identified that we were wrong, we're sorry about that. And they smack them on the hand, naughty, naughty, don't do that anymore, be careful. But
right.
Guess what? And then they absolve them of it, and then they say, and we have to absolve Delta Airlines of this, because if we didn't, it would create a chilling effect on the airline industry, the leadership, the managers. It would create a chilling effect on them to identify a potential safety hazard, and therefore we're going to have to dismiss this case, just like they did in the Bill Hoper case. That's another story, and that's when you really got to hear it, because that did go to the Supreme Court. And the reason it went to the Supreme Court is not, if it was Hoper's appeal to the Supreme Court, it would have never been heard. Just like I appealed, just like the NBank coordinator Beverly Harris at the Sixth Circuit tampered with my pleadings and pulled pages out on purpose to time me out, so that my petition for rehearing, begging, please hear my case. I have to write a petition for rehearing in bank because you have a corrupt law clerk that wrote a fraudulent decision answering his response in the district court. Please hear my case, circuit court. And then I filed to the Supreme Court, and of course, it's never heard. And you should know, gentlemen, when I filed my briefs to the Supreme Court, in many instances, the parties involved never even followed Supreme Court protocol in filing a waiver of response, either a response or waiver of response. They didn't even do it. And you know why? Because they knew they didn't have to. We don't have to file a response because we got this under control. It's in our sphere of influence. And who's gonna know? Well, guess what? Michael Decon and Mike, you guys made it possible for people to know. God bless you.
Love that.
I detected some sarcasm in
Yeah.
Hey, tell me if Doug Greene doesn't sound like an attorney.
He does. I might hire him. I might fire the lawyer that I have and pick up Doug here.
Yeah, it's horrible, to think that they're going to overturn Carlene's case more than likely.
Are you Jewish, by the way, Doug?
No, my last name used to be Greene.
I can't hire you then, Doug. I'm sorry.
We changed it.
I have a Jew-only policy here. In terms of, business, you know how it goes. You know how it goes, Doug.
Hey, guys, you got to invite us back. I want to share with you the Bill Hoper story. It's an unbelievable story of prejudice and bias and discrimination and corruption that it was also, attached to the airline industry. And in his case, actually, he won a $1.7 million decision in the state court. Now, keep in mind, the state court, and most people don't know this, and you guys are actually providing an opportunity to educate the audience on things that they need to know.
Yes, sir.
That normally they wouldn't know. And so knowledge is power. But the state courts, judges in most states are elected. They're elected. They're not appointed. Okay, by the Federalist Society and Mitch McConnell and his cronies to overtake the courts. And so subsequently, because of their appointments, they realized that sometimes they got to be honest and they have to make fair decisions and they have to allow people to have a jury trial. Americans aren't allowed to have a jury trial. When you got arbitration and you've got this motions for summary judgment, these are two weapons used against Americans to make sure you never walk into a courtroom in front of a jury trial to have your case heard by people like you, all of us. They don't want that to happen. That's how dark money controls it. The 1% Club keeps us out of court and to exercise our rights. That's how they do it. Those two tools, arbitration, rigged arbitration, that's why the FAIR Act's been proposed to be passed to end forced arbitration for consumers, employees, and also through passing motions for summary judgment, which is basically a whimsical dismissal of a case despite the fact that there's material facts in dispute. And all there has to be is one. But they say there's none, and they're lying. But the long and short of it is in many of these cases, never see the light of day of a trial unless it's the other side. If it's the dark money that wants to appeal, then they will. So, like, for instance, just a quick summary. In the Hoper case, I'm not going to tell you all about it, but just briefly, Bill Hoper was absolutely targeted. He was, because he enforced safety and security of the airlines at Air Wisconsin, and they set him up to fail. He was a federal flight deck officer. He was in Dallas going through training. They forced him onto a new airplane so they could set him up to fail at the simulator, and he knew what was going on. They failed a motor on him. The guy that was designated to fly with him, he purposely shut down the good motor, and all of a sudden they were a glider. And he knew they were setting him up to fail. It was without a doubt. You're supposed to train the way you fly. Okay, you're not supposed to purposely fail people. It's negative training. And so subsequently, Bill knew it. He said, "All right, stop the sim." He pushed his seat back. He says, "I'm done." He says, "I'm going home." And I'm filing a grievance with the union. Well, they knew he wasn't in a duty status as a federal flight deck officer because he wasn't flying, and he would have violated SOP, standard operating procedures, to bring his weapon to training. Why would he? He would have had to put it in a lockbox with the local law enforcement officers, and that's a pain in the ass. So nonetheless, they lied about Bill. They called the TSA and they says, "Hey, we think you got a pilot here that's he's mentally unstable, and we believe he's armed and on your airplane." Well, they knew he wasn't armed, and he wasn't mentally unstable. He was pissed off. And since when being pissed off makes a person mentally unstable? He had a right to be pissed off because they were trying to end his career for doing his job. And so subsequently, he boarded the flight, United flight. They pushed the plane back. United Airlines, Dan, here we go again. And they pushed the flight back, and all of a sudden the TSA contacted the tower. They told them they had the plane returned to the gate. The TSA stormed the airplane. They dragged Bill Hoper off the jet. They humiliated him in front of other people, treated him like a common criminal. And this is a federal flight deck officer in good standing and a captain for a major airline. And they drug him off the plane. They threw him on the ground, and they basically said, "Where's your gun?" He says, "What do you mean, where's my gun?" He said, "I'm not in a duty status. I don't have my gun. It's in my lockbox at home where it's supposed to be." And so he filed a defamation suit against Air Wisconsin. And he won in the state court. Now, keep in mind, it was a state court. He got a jury trial because the state courts aren't rigged like the federal courts. Mitch McConnell can't control the state courts because they're individual states, but he's got a lockdown in the federal courts across the entire nation, district, circuit, and Supreme Court, all three levels of adjudication. Now, the state courts, because these judges are elected and not appointed for life-term appointments, he got a jury trial. All the facts of the case were presented to a jury. They found Air Wisconsin, without a doubt, purposely did what they did. It was defamation. They didn't have grounds to terminate his employment. And he was awarded $1.7 million, and he was supposed to get his job back. Well, nonetheless, they appealed it to the Colorado State Supreme Court. Air Wisconsin did. And the Supreme Court sustained the decision to award Bill Hoper damages, $1.7 million, and get his job back. But see, Air Wisconsin is a very powerful company, and they have a lot of money, just like all the other airlines, dark money donors, and connections in D.C. and the power players. And all they got to do is call one of their buddies there who pulls the strings to make things happen. And guess what? Their case will be heard by the Supreme Court. But if the shoe was on the other foot, Bill Hoper would never have his case heard, just like none of my cases were heard. And none of any other Americans' cases would be heard in this type of scenario. So the case goes to the Supreme Court, and their theme was, well, we can't have you ruling in this guy's favor, despite it may look like defamation. It may look like we target this guy. This would create a chilling effect on the airline industry, and we would never potentially report any possible concerns. Well, Judge Sotomayor, who was one of the few honest judges on the Supreme Court, she basically said, she took the position in dissent, since when is being angry does that medically diagnose a person being mentally unstable? Mr. Hoper had every reason to be angry. But nonetheless, because of this abuse of the chilling effect, using it in opposite on behalf of the airlines to enforce their labor containment program against pilots trying to protect the flying public, they basically dismissed Bill Hoper's case. The Supreme Court, after a jury trial of his peers, ruled in his favor at two levels of adjudication, the state court. Well, the reason they did this is because they knew that this was going to go directly from the state court. After you file an appeal to the state Supreme Court, it goes directly, it bypasses the district court or circuit court, and it goes directly to the Supreme Court if they'll hear your case. But you got to be somebody connected to money and power for that to happen. It's like it's a lottery. There's no oversight in the United States of America over the lower courts. You have to establish a circuit court split. But his case never even made it to the circuit court. I established countless circuit court splits. And for your audience and your listeners, a circuit court split means there's 12 circuit courts across the country. And one circuit court can't interpret the law differently than the rest. So case law is established as a precedent that this is the rule of law, and the other circuit courts must follow it. And so if you find a circuit court split that shows a disparity in interpretation of the law, then the Supreme Court's supposed to hear it, and they didn't. Well, they didn't. So this is what we're faced with. This is the abuse or chilling effect, and the chilling effect is actually against the employees, the whistleblowers that are trying to do their job to protect the security and safety of the flying public and the American people across not just the airline industry, but multiple industries across the United States of America.
I agree.
Our system is broke, gentlemen. Let me just end my one last note. There's 4 words on the front of the U.S. Supreme Court. Does anybody know what they are?
No.
Okay, well, I'm going to tell you. Equal justice under law. Gentlemen, I'm here to tell you it's a woolly mammoth and it doesn't exist. It's extinct. It's not true. It's the great American lie. And if I'm wrong, then let's have the Supreme Court hear my case.
Right.
Let's have the Department of Labor hear my case that's been sitting on ice for 6 years waiting for an administrative review board judge to listen to my case. 6 years, and I haven't heard a single thing from these people. 6 years. And UPS stole 12 years of my retirement. They stole my income, my pay. I had to start over from scratch. I had to leave my own country. They blackballed me. They're still blackballing me. Now they're trying to steal half of my retirement to punish me and to shut me up so that I don't have conversations like this telling the truth about corporate.
Well, it destroyed a 27-year marriage for me and my 2 kids who are now adults, blame me for the divorce, still believe the official 9/11 story, believe it or not. Think I'm a whacked out conspiracy nut and don't talk to me. And besides destroying my career and reputation as a pilot, I lost about $4 million in pay, pension, and stock. So I took a pretty bad beating
Right.
doing what I'm doing. But that really isn't my impetus. Does it upset me? Do I think about it a lot? Of course I do.
Right.
'Cause I'm living off a pension and Social Security right now, much reduced. But that isn't my impetus for continuing to do what I'm doing. I already said why I am doing what I'm doing.
Yes, sir. Well,
So,
Dan, I do want to thank both you and Mr. Greene, Captain Greene here, for your time and, of course, all your hard work both of you have done, and both of you have been through the ringer now. Now that I know Doug's story, he too faced a lot of hurdles and obstacles, just like yourself, Dan, and many others out there, like the both of you, who face lots of issues just talking about these sort of things.
yeah.
It's very unfortunate, but Dan, I'll start with you. Any final words before we cut you loose here?
No, I appreciate you having me on. And if you haven't written it down, go to 911pilot.org. It's a pretty easy website to read, and there's some pretty important videos on each page of the site. And then join us at the top of the page. We'd appreciate it.
Very nice. Well, Dan, I will talk to you on the other side, my friend. Thank you so much for being here.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you again.
gentlemen. Thanks again for coming on.
Michael?
Yes, I'm still here. I was just getting rid of Dan here from the call. Now it is your turn before we cut you loose. Captain Greene, any last words before we let you loose here?
Absolutely. And I wish Dan was still on the line. I just want to take a minute to recognize Captain Dan Hanley. He is an intrepid man, and he is literally made out of titanium with his personal resolve. Oh, there's Dan calling me right now.
Yeah, he's calling you. He's excited.
Well, hold on. Let me answer it on my phone. Hey, Dan, I'm still talking to Mike and Michael. No, I want you to stay because I want you to hear what I'm going to say.
He wants you to hear. Yes.
Well, stick around. I want you to hear this. I'm just letting people know what you've been through, and you're an American hero. You're don't interrupt me. I'm talking. Dan Hanley, Captain Dan Hanley, is one of the finest men of integrity and honor, and he has been abused by a broken system of corruption in the United States. But despite the way they beat him down and took everything that he worked so hard for and hadn't believed in, his resolve to stand strong and fight for right and wrong, the rights and freedoms that we think we have, he's trying to make sure that a sense of decency is restored so that Americans all across our great nation can exercise those freedoms. This is a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. We're not their slaves, okay? And we have to enforce our rights. And thank you, Michael Decon and Mike, whatever your real last name is. I like your stage name. It's pretty good. But thank you guys. I'm serious. It's so important for people to know the truth. Mainstream media will never run a story about this. Okay?
That's right.
They won't do it. They won't run a story about Reality Winner. That's a name. It sounds pretty crazy. I think her father was a Grateful Dead fan. But that's another story we got to talk about.
We will,
I want you to Google Reality Winner. She's a political prisoner in the United States of America for telling the truth. And she's also an American hero and a veteran. This is what our government does to veterans.
Yeah, we will do that in the future. We'll bring you back on here, Mr. Greene.
Great. Guys, you're the best. Thank you for your attention, and thank you to the listeners, and God bless you.
Yes, thank you so much. God bless, and we will talk to you on the other side. Captain Greene.
Take care.
Take care, my friend. Yeah, he's like, don't talk. I'm talking here, Dan. I got this, Dan. How dare you? That was pretty good, though. Yeah, I liked Captain Doug Greene. That was fun. I always enjoy Captain Dan Hanley, of course. Always a great guy to interview. Always full of passion and information. It's always a learning experience talking to these pilots, Mike.
Definitely.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I had to do it. I'm sorry. I did miss that sound effect right there. It's been a while since I've heard it. But yes, we are almost out of time here, Mike, and it's been a great show. But Mike, we are left with some very interesting individuals to talk about before we check out here. I mean, we do have Laura Loomer to talk about. If you recall our friend Laura Loomer, the last time we mentioned the name, Mike, she was getting some sort of Nazi tattoo. Do you remember that?
Yes, I do.
Oh my God. Well, she's back, Mike. Are you excited?
I can't seem to hold it in. No.
Oh my God. Let's hear what Laura Loomer has to say. This should be pretty interesting, Mike. Let's hear what she has to say.
This is not just about free speech. This is about civil rights. The act of being deplatformed is a civil rights violation. And free speech is not only the bedrock of our society, but free speech is a civil right. And I'm running for Congress again because I feel so passionately about this issue, and I'm not going to stop until I get into Congress, until I win, to uphold our election integrity and to let people know that it's going to be the American people who pick and choose election winners and losers, not big tech. And when I get to Congress, one of the first things I'm going to do is propose legislation to update our Civil Rights Act to include political affiliation as a protected class.
Wow, are you excited to hear that news?
I don't even know what she's talking about. What is she talking about?
She's going to run for Congress, I guess. She vows to run for Congress. And it won't go anywhere, of course, Mike. You know she's not going to win anything.
Oh, God, let's hope not.
She's terrible.
Mm-hmm.
She's not going to win shit.
Hey, I got to interrupt you real quick.
Go
I
ahead.
give you the news. I
Jump
got
in
my anti-China virus vaccination today.
You got the vaccine?
I did.
And how do you feel?
They told me that I might feel a little sick, like a flu-like symptom, but they said it will pass. And that's just like when you get a flu shot. Sometimes they say you'll get it. But so far, so good.
So in other words, you're okay. You're not feeling any sickness, nothing of that nature.
Fine.
You're cool.
I'm fine. It was exactly 12 hours ago that I got it.
So you're not going to die, in other words. You're good.
Let's hope not. Knock on wood.
Yeah, you'll be fine. You're not going to die. Come on.
No, of course not. But,
you're a strong man. You've defeated cancer multiple times. No one's going to take you out. Vaccine won't kill you, Mike.
I hope not.
Not you, at least. I mean, you fought cancer. Your immune system is strong.
Well, no, it's actually quite weak.
No, I mean, in terms of COVID, I mean, your system will not fall to COVID, that's for sure. Even before the vaccine, I think your blood, there was some sort of like strange immunity already built up because of the radiation. It probably blocked the COVID. You never know.
He did say something. The guy who gave him the injection did say something to me that was quite interesting. He said, even after having gotten the shot, there is a possibility that you could, now heck, check this out, you could actually still catch COVID. However, this vaccine will actually help you beat it because you won't get it as bad. That's what I was told.
I see. Yes.
So,
if you do contract
just
it, yeah, you won't have the symptoms that would be problematic, in other words.
That's the way I understand
Yeah,
it, yes.
I see. Very good. Well, I'm glad you are feeling well and you're not dead, Mike.
I'm glad I'm not dead, too.
I don't want you to die.
Thank you, Michael.
I need you alive. We all need you alive, Mike. So no, don't die, please.
Please, I don't want. I don't have time. I got too many things I got to get done.
Yeah, you don't got time to die.
I owe too many bills.
Yeah, so what good are you if you're dead?
I'd be sleeping a lot better, that's for sure.
That's what life's all about. What good are you if you are dead in the ground? You can't get any money out of you. Can't make you work. So why would we want you if you're dead? No one likes anyone who's dead. Come on. So don't die, Mike.
Yeah, it's not a fun thing.
That's right. So, Mike, we are almost at a close here, and we do have a right-wing pastor to go through here. E.W. Jackson says the Democrats today are no different than the KKK.
Well, it's true.
He's a black gentleman, by the way.
Is he?
Yes,
okay.
sir.
Bravo.
So this is coming from him. Sir. He's not wearing a cowboy hat, even though I wish he was. But this is what he has to say. Yeah, let's hear it.
But I'm convinced that they'd kill us if they could. Just like they did in the antebellum South and in the Ku Klux Klan era after Reconstruction. Just, he's out of place. Kill him. Get rid of him. We don't want his voice being heard. We don't want him to stir up the others. Next thing you know, they'll all be thinking they can think independently and they can think for themselves. And they don't need to be supporting people who tell them they're doing them a favor by killing their babies. They're going to question. They're going to question us. They're going to question us after all we've done for them. I mean, we put them in the finest huts in the projects. We're supplying them with marijuana now.
Oh shit.
He's got a point.
And we vote to increase their welfare checks. And they're going to contradict us and suggest that they're not going to vote for us? Based upon some of the communications I get, believe me, they'd gladly kill us. They can't do that. Frankly, and it's not because they're not evil enough to do it, it's because they're too cowardly to do it.
Yeah, and that was E.W. Jackson. What do you think of that, Mike? Powerful, right?
Very powerful. Yeah, I commend his ability to speak out like that. As I mentioned once before, Malcolm X said one of the biggest enemies the black man has is the white liberal, and he couldn't have been more correct.
What about Paula White?
Wherever I go, God rules.
What do you feel about that, Mike?
When I walk on White House grounds, God walks on White House grounds. I had every right and authority to declare the White House as holy ground because I was standing there, and where I stand is holy.
It never gets old.
To say no to President Trump would be saying no to God. And I won't do that.
We are in a spiritual war right now. Let every demonic network that has aligned itself against the purpose, against the calling of President Trump, let it be broken. Let it be torn down in the name of Jesus.
You want me to tell you what my thoughts are? The thoughts of the King of Kings, the thoughts of the Lord of Lords. I'm downloading heaven.
That's my favorite part. Imagine hearing that in bed.
Oh God.
She's orgasming and she's having an orgasm and you hear that.
Oh my God.
She starts speaking in tongues when she climaxes. Wow.
Oh my gosh.
She must be fun.
Oh yeah. In a nightmare.
In a nightmare sense, yes.
I kind of know I'm a little bit cute, all right?
I am Paula, who is pretty. Well, maybe I'm not going to be pretty when I'm 90 years old.
Here's this former messed up Mississippi girl
lived in a trailer that they called trailer trash. Daddy committed suicide, got pregnant out of wedlock, been married, been divorced, not just once, twice.
People go, well, how'd you become the spiritual advisor of the president? We'll get to that later. It's all in there. Michael Jackson, Kid Rock, the president, it's all in there, all right?
Thank you, Paula. What a great job you do. The evangelicals. I hear we're more popular than
Oh boy. But yes, enough of that. Enough of that. Yes, I agree. I agree. It was very wacky, and that was Paula White. Ladies and gentlemen, give her a round of applause. Yes, thank Jesus Christ. So, Mike, I do want to thank you also for being a part of the program. I feel very sad that the show's going to end now. I would want this to last another hour, but, I don't work for free. Mike, if somebody would donate, a couple more $100, then maybe I will do another hour. But until then, I mean, shit, it's over. There's no point. I'm not going to talk to this microphone any longer. What would be the point, Mike? I mean, we already went 2 hours, almost 3 hours. Everyone is so...
No, it's 3 hours. It's just about 3 hours.
Everyone's so unthankful, though. I mean, no one is, paying to hear this shit. No one wants to hear this anymore. I'm going to kill myself after the show. I might just end it. The way the show's going, fuck the show. I'm just going to kill myself. This is ridiculous, Mike.
Well, you've come this far.
I come this far, yes, Mike. So anyways, I do want to thank you, Mike, for being a part of the program. It was a good one. I just wish I drank more beer for the show. That's all. It's my only regret. But aside from that, Mike, I mean, I love the guest. I want to thank Doug Greene, Captain Doug Greene, and Captain Dan Hanley. Both were incredible. And if you want to hear a replay of this, make sure to search Michael Decon or the Michael Decon Program on all popular platforms, and you will hear me. It's true. You'll hear this. That's right. Sign up today. Patreon.com/Michael Decon. $5 only. Bonus content. Remember, donate. I will die if you don't. You want me to die? You want me to live in the street? Don't donate. And that will happen, folks. Support the program. Mike, go ahead. Plug anything you'd like before we cut you loose. Go ahead.
Thank you. I want to say thank you to Michael for having me on as co-host tonight. I had a great time as usual. Thank you to the guests who came on, the captains. And also, I'd like to thank the listeners, both live and podcast listeners who have checked out the Michael Decon Program and listened to our shows. If you're interested in anything that I've done, if anyone is interested in my musical efforts, you can check out MikeHideous.com. That is MYKE, hideous.com. You can also check out my art and photography, which is also for sale, both originals and prints, at SpyManPhotoandArt.com.
There's a weird pause right there.
Well, you know why? My bird is like making noises now that I'm talking. So I was trying to like.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, I didn't know if I was coming through. So once again, it's SpyManPhotoandArt.com. Lastly, if you are interested in contacting me online through social media, you can reach me at Facebook.com/HideousMike, MYKE. Thank you, everyone. I had a great time tonight. Thank you, Michael. And I'll talk to you soon, buddy.
Talk to you soon, my friend. Good night.
You have a good weekend, okay?
Bye-bye, brother. Bye-bye.
All right. Good night.
And there he goes, ladies and gentlemen. That was Mike Hideous, the one and only, yes, my co-host. He did draw assignment this evening, and he made us all proud. I did enjoy that, yes. International listeners out there, thank you so much for your support. And by the way, I had no idea Captain Doug Greene was in Germany. Guten Morgen to Doug Greene. It's morning time out there. Yes, lots of German listeners out there. I appreciate all of you. The Russians, the Canadians, the folks in New Zealand, Australia. I see you out there. I appreciate all of you out there. And yes, those of you in the chat room right now, I see you, David and K-Dub and Lilith And Jess, I'm not quite sure I'm saying that right, and Lone Wolf, and Kimberly, and the End of Days Prophet. Yes, I do want to thank all of you for hanging out with us this evening. It's been a great time. I wish all of you the best of health. I wish you all the best in your future endeavors. Anyone out there listening to this, friend, foe, enemy, anyone who's wished me dead, you have the right to feel that way. All good with me. I appreciate all of you out there. But yes, and Rigo out there, Rigo Vasquez, I think that's his last name. I'm not quite sure. Can't really read from far. Oh, yeah, that was his last name. Yes. Thank you so much, Rigo. We appreciate all of you out there. And my God, what a show. What a show. And I did have more content to bring you, but we ran out of time, folks. Almost 3 hours. And gonna have to leave you with a bombshell here, folks. The next show, I will talk about a former guest, Jeffrey Prather. He is facing some very, very serious allegations, some sexual allegations. I'm not sure if they are accurate or not. I'm not quite sure. We will bring him in on a future episode to talk about these hellacious allegations that are made his way. And this is from an episode that happened in Australia many, many years ago. And, I would like to talk to you more about that. But next show, I promise we will get into this. And holy shit, Jeffrey Prather, the last guy I thought would ever do something like this. So, I'm blown away, folks. I am blown away by this. My head is spinning just thinking about it. I have no idea what's going to happen. I have no idea if he's going to be on the show or not. I might not even tell him I'm going to bring up these hellacious allegations because he might not even want to be on the show if I tell him beforehand. So we might ambush him a little bit here. I know, so bad, so wrong, but it feels so right. I apologize for my cruelness, folks, but I have to be honest. I have to bring you the truth, no matter how bad it hurts. So once again, ladies and gentlemen, it has been a true pleasure and honor to sit here and broadcast for all of you. It's been 3 hours, and now it is that time to shut it down. Once again, thank you so much for being a part of the program. You know who you are out there. Thank all of you so much for helping me get this off the ground. You know who you are out there. Once again, stay safe, everyone, no matter where you are on this island Earth. I'm Michael Decon, and with that said, the world is a mysterious place, and life itself is a mystery. Until next time, mahalo.